Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Audit and Governance Committee meeting for Thursday, the 29th of May, 2025. My name is Councillor Marcus Andrews and I'm chairing the meeting. Before we get into the actual agenda of the meeting, can I ask the Democratic Services Officer to read out some housekeeping notices, please?
Marcus, we can't hear you. I could hear you very well. I don't. Is the microphone on?
I've switched it on.
Yeah, speak a bit louder. We'll bring it towards you. That's fine. Okay, so I'll read out housekeeping. So please note this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point, which is at the front of this building in Bourne Avenue. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies. Have we received any apologies?
Thank you. We've received an apology from Councillor Michael Tarling, and item 2 substitute members, Councillor Emily Harman is here today for Councillor Tarling.
Okay, can I welcome Emily, and also can I welcome a new member of this committee, Councillor Buck. Welcome joining MG. Thank you. Yes, I'll welcome you to joining the committee.
It's very difficult to hear you, dear.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll speak more to the microphone. Well, welcome and joining the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda. This is the election of the chair for 2025-26. What I would like to say is I have enjoyed the past 18 months or so as chair, but for various reasons, I'm not seeking nomination for another term. As such, I can adjudicate in the election of a new chair. And I would actually like to nominate the current vice chair, Councillor Eleanor Connolly, for the municipal year of 25-26. She joined the council 2 years ago and has served an apprenticeship, and she is well suited to step up. Indeed, she is in her daytime job and I gather an auditor and has considerable skills that will help this committee. So I will propose her as chair, and can I call upon Councillor Claire Waite to second?
Very happy to second. I also echo your comments about the job that Eleanor's done. I think she'll be an excellent chair, and thank you for your tenure as well, Marcus.
Okay, I'm looking for any other nominations for chair of the committee. If anybody would like to propose another councillor, if they could indicate, please.
I'd like to so propose Councillor John Beasley.
Councillor Butt, could you just use your microphone, please?
Oh, so I'm now worthy of...
On the right, on the left-hand side.
Right, okay, not hear me. People can usually hear me without a mic. I'd like to propose Councillor John Beasley, and I'm quite happy that we hear from the candidates as to why they put themselves forward. I think that would be interesting to hear. Thank you.
Okay, that will need a seconder for that proposal.
Yeah,
Councillor Margaret Phipps.
in the interest of actually having a competition here, and I think we do need someone from the, not from the administration, which both of these are, I will second this, and I also think it's a good idea if they said why they would like to be chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Before we go into a secret ballot where we will be going offline, as I think one of you've indicated, you're suggesting or asking whether the two candidates would like to say a few words. Councillor Connolly, as you were proposed first, if you would like to say something. Thank you.
Thank you, yes, and I appreciate the words said in support. To be clear, this is not a role I have actively sought. Some might call it a bit of a poisoned chalice. But I was committed as I stood in the election on the basis of trying to increase scrutiny and transparency around some of the financial transactions that have happened at the council in recent years. And as part of that, I'm happy to step up in the interest of making this an effective committee. So I'm a new councillor this term, and I'm a Labour councillor, one of a small group of Labour councillors this term. There was an even smaller group of Labour councillors in the last council and none before that. So to be very clear, I am completely independent in this. I have no links to the current administration. I have no links to the previous administration, and I have no links to either party either. So I think that that may be of benefit in trying to ensure the independence of this committee. I don't come to this with any axe to grind or any baggage or any personal knowledge of some of the things that have been going on. And I hope that will help in trying to make this properly independent and getting the assurance we need.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Beasley, a few words if you wish.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Chair. And I'd just like to add my comments in support of myself, obviously. I chaired the Audit and Governance Committee for the first 4 years of BCP Council's life. That was during a fairly volatile period for lots of different reasons. I've always believed audit and governance function to be totally independent, not only of the administration, but to the extent that it has to do its work and do it transparently to the rest of the council as well. And I hope and I believe that that's what I did throughout those 4 years. Quite often it is challenging, particularly for the chair of audit and governance, to achieve that. And I hoped also that I could set the example that I tried to follow against my background in the former Bournemouth Council, because as leader and portfolio holder for finance, I was, if you like, on the other side of the fence throughout that entire period. So my skill set in terms of dealing with the issues of external and internal audit, obviously very high on that agenda, and learning from the activities of predecessors within Bournemouth Council who have chaired audit and governance, again, independently. And it was always my hope that that could continue through BCP Council as well. We are facing some real challenges here, and the scrutiny of the administration and all the other matters which need to be looked at, including those that go into the officer realm as well, absolutely critical, and scrutiny and transparency throughout all of that, again with the independent function, I believe to be paramount in the work of audit and governance and in any regulated organisation. So I'm very happy for my name to go forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. As we have a contest to validated proposals and have been seconded, we will need to go offline for several minutes. And those viewing will be back as soon as the result of the secret ballot has been undertaken. Thank you. Hello, welcome back. We have had the secret ballot carried out and the result was 6 votes for Councillor Connolly and 3 votes for Councillor Beasley. So Councillor Connolly is the new chair of A&G. We all now need to sort of swap over.
Just before we move on, I just might raise something, please.
If it's relevant to the election, yeah.
It certainly is. It certainly is, Mr. Chairman, retiring chairman. We obviously 3 votes to 6, and congratulations. But this is supposed to be a secret ballot. Now, I would imagine it's no secret as to 3 people that have just supported Councillor Beasley. So I think that we have a contention there as to secret ballots. I was not aware that numbers were ever given. The ballot is secret and the winner is declared. So why we're having numbers, I am uncertain. I'd be grateful if I could be advised. Thank you.
The Democratic Services Officer can answer that question or query.
So
It would normally be that you've received the amount of ballots of the people that are here, and the winner is, rather than as to the exact ballots, because clearly it's not a secret. Okay, thank you.
So we do announce the numbers after the ballot. The reason the slips are numbered is, as I've just demonstrated, you need to ensure that only the number, so there's 9 members of the committee and they're numbered so that I don't hand out too many. And that's why they're collected in.
I think this is something we can take further on, but it's certainly a problem for me because it's no longer secret. But Jill, absolutely.
There are no names disclosed.
Following the requirements of
we are.
what you've been asked to do. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Slade.
Thank you. I just want to clarify for anyone who's watching this, every meeting we've had in this council, from the very first day this council existed, with the election of leader of the council in 2019, has given the number of votes cast in favour, against and abstentions. Whether it's the full council of 76, or whether it's a council, a individual committee, the reality is, whether it's the alternative is a public ballot, in which case we declare it publicly. So no one knows who those 3 are. There are various assumptions that might be made about who those 3 might be, but I don't think we should automatically make those assumptions. I think it's very unfair to the new chair. I'm excited to see what Eleanor is going to bring to this with her role, and I think, this is the way it works.
If I may just respond, and then I'm
We
sure
need to move on, Councillor Butt.
I mean no disrespect to the new chair whatsoever, and my hearty
We need to
congratulations.
move on.
It's a point of principle, and I've raised it. And thank you, Councillor Slade, for your extensive explanation. Thank you.
If it's of any interest to you, there is a Constitution Working Party where I would suggest that if you have concerns about this, you could contact the monitoring officer and ask for that to be put on the agenda of their first meeting, and then it can be discussed by the Working Party. But we now need to move on to the next item on the agenda, and I need to pass on to the actual chair of this committee now. Thank you. If you just hold on for us to swap seats.
Okay, and thank you very much. Thank you for your votes, for those of you that did, and I appreciate the support. I am very aware and appreciative of the gravity and the responsibility of this position. I don't mean to be blithe when I say it's a poison chalice. I think it is an incredibly important position, and I am very aware of that. So I do want to thank Councillor Andrews very much for the last 2 years as chair. It's a difficult role. I appreciate his kindness, and I hope we can continue to benefit from his experience. It is a difficult role. Let's be frank, this council has a lot of work to do to develop a more positive reputation with residents. I mean, our residents still refer to it as being referred to in private eye. And there's a lot of misinformation about what was the decision of elected councillors, what was council officers, and these stories let down some of the really good work that happens. So I am under no illusions as to how important it is that we tackle this. So I really want us to do our best as a committee to assert that independence and be clear that we are going to act effectively, give that challenge and give that scrutiny. So as I mentioned, I have no background in either of the last administrations or this one, and I hope that is to benefit of us. You mentioned that I am an auditor by profession. I'm not an auditor by profession, but I have extensive professional experience working with internal and external audit, as well as firms' risk management. So as new chair of the committee, I hope you'll bear with me as I work on this and find my way. I hope to meet with all of you individually to talk about your views on how we can work more effectively as a committee and learn best practice. We've already met with the independent persons. I'd be very grateful for that. So I will be in touch with all of you on that. I'll be seeking training on chairing this committee, given its importance. And I also suggest I'm going to propose that we arrange some training for the whole committee on working effectively as an audit and governance committee, particularly with some of these very sensitive topics. And I know that a number of you are experienced councillors, but I'm sure you will all appreciate the benefits of learning best practice and learning from other councils. So I hope you will take us up on that opportunity. So with that in mind, happy to move on to the election of vice chair. I am in the interest of continuity, and I would propose Councillor Andrews continues in the capacity as vice chair. Would anybody like to second that?
I'll second Marcus's proposal, if I may. I have nothing to add to what you already said. I only support what you said.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other nominations for vice chair? No? Okay, well, with that, I believe that means that Councillor Andrews is vice chair. Thank you. Okay, so do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or any other interests on any items on the agenda? Nope.
Madam Chairman, for clarity and openness, as I said at one of our previous meetings, reference Carter's Quay, which is on the agenda. I am a guarantor to my daughter's tenancy of a house which is near Carter's Quay. I happen to drive past it every other day, more or less, giving lifts. And it's not that relevant, but I would just mention it for openness. Thank you.
Thank you. So assuming no others, let's move on to the confirmation of minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of March 2025. Wait.
Yes, I'd just like to say what an excellent job Jill did with those minutes. It was such a chaotic meeting, and I was sort of reliving it as I was going through it. And yeah, you did a fantastic job, and I would like to propose them for approval, please.
Yeah, I very much support that. That was a well written up minutes. Does anybody have anything they would like to say on the minutes of that meeting? Do we have a proposer? Thank you. And a seconder?
I'll second their acceptance.
Thank you very much. All in favour? Okay. Brilliant. Noted. Thank you, Councillor Slade. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. And
I wasn't at the meeting, but I was listening online, just to clarify.
thank you. Okay, moving on to item 7, public issues. So, will the Democratic Services Officer confirm if there are any public questions, statements or petitions that have been submitted?
Thank you, Chair. We have received 3 public questions, 2 are from Mr McKinstry on agenda item 9 and agenda item 10.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr Kinstry. Please go ahead.
Okay, congratulations, Councillor Connolly. Am I audible, first of all? Brilliant. Okay, regarding item 9 tonight, BCP Future Places Investigation Scope, paragraph 75, I beg your pardon, page 75, paragraph 7, 4th bullet point. Quote, some committee members have said they have external sources of information that they believe will be essential to the investigation. Committee members are invited to send or give the investigator any evidence they have. Unquote. Several provisos then follow. Does this invitation extend to councillors not on this committee, former councillors, council officers, former council officers and former Future Places employees? Can you also confirm whether anyone involved in Future Places signed any kind of non-disclosure agreement, which may, of course, prohibit or inhibit those persons from reaching out?
Thank you. If an individual has external sources of information relevant to the agreed scope of the investigation, then they are able to send the evidence to the investigator. From an employment law perspective, non-disclosure agreements normally contain confidentiality clauses which restrict any party from raising awareness of the existence of such an agreement and all the terms contained therein.
Okay, thank you for that. Second question regarding item 10, re the Carter's Quay update. Have the investigators looked at an email among the online planning records sent from Inland Homes PLC to a planning officer on the 24th of August 2021 at 13:33 hours? This describes an upcoming meeting with a senior council officer, quote, about ensuring we are all on track for implementing in November, as the agreement it will be built for BCP has now been confirmed, unquote. The email is striking because at that point, 24th of August, the Carter's Quay proposals hadn't been approved by Cabinet, which was on the 1st of September, nor full council, which was 3 weeks away. If this matter has been investigated, what was the basis for that email, and do any records of a confirmatory meeting conducted on or around 24th of August 2021 survive? If this matter has not been investigated, could it be inquired into?
Thank you. Audit and Governance Committee has indicated that a future investigation may be necessary, but the exact coverage and scope will be somewhat dependent on the outcome of the ongoing administration of Inland Homes. The email was from a third party, and so we have not established why the email was drafted in those terms. Separately, the planning case officer followed due process in accordance with the statutory requirements for planning applications. Cabinet approved the proposal on 1st of September 2021, and contracts were entered into subsequently in November.
Okay, I have a question for Mr. Ian Redman. Can I just check Democratic Services have got that as well?
Chair, I would just point out that I haven't had nothing from Mr. Redmond to say that he is nominating Mr. McKinstry to read out his question, which is what he is supposed to do.
What does the Constitution say in that eventuality?
If someone is unable to attend and fails to nominate someone to read out the question on their behalf, the question will not be read out, but will be responded to by way of a written answer.
Unfortunately, that sounds quite clear that without that permission, that you can't say it in Mr. Redmond's place, and I am sorry for that, but it will be in the minutes of the next meeting.
I will check if that's the case, but he will certainly have a written reply and we'll circulate it to everybody.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to public statements. The Democratic Services. Oh, and Mr. McKinstry, while you're there, why don't you do the one from yourself while you're sitting there?
This statement, excuse me, this statement relates to item 9. Regarding 3.1 of the Future Places scoping proposals, recruitment processes. Of note is an email to Graham Farrant released under FOI, dated 14th of June 2021, and describing a 3-stage appointment process for a senior officer of the company. Stages 1 and 2 are redacted, but stage 3 reads, and this is all in quotes, the final stage will be a permanent offer of employment as the MD for the URC, brackets, which I believe, redacted, has already received from Drew, close brackets. I was open that there will have to be a form of selection to justify the offer and position, and that is work we have yet to do, but I believe that we can make it safe for scrutiny purposes, without causing a huge investment in time and resources. End of quotation. I've notified the head of audit, who will doubtless peruse the entire unredacted email, plus any related correspondence.
Thank you very much. Over to the other statements from Mr. Gatchell.
Thank you, Chair. So Mr. Gatchell has submitted two statements in relation to agenda item 8. Statement 1, 2023-24 officers' loss of office compensation, £37,500, special severance payments, government guidance. The guidance emphasises accountability to taxpayers by limiting excessive exit payments to local authority officers. EX13 on financial regulations 5-54 defines guidance designated approvers and 3 payment bans. On that basis, the auditor contends there is no ultra vires element within the compensation and no remedial action is required. That incorrectly conflates two separate processes. The guidance regulates amount. It does not empower terminating staff employment in lieu of the 2015 and 2001 standing orders regulations. Termination is not within the leader's executive powers. The guidance reference to settlement agreements includes negotiated termination to avoid litigation. £37,500 approximates to 3 months' salary, including monitoring officer pay element. Whichever scenario applied, I explained that termination or dismissal of a monitoring officer requires, under 2015 Regulation 2, members' approval before serving notice. Officers failed to initiate members' approval. Statement 2. Unacceptable accounts, misstatements passing muster with officers and external auditor. My 27th of February 2025 public statements include identified material discrepancies in annual accounts, fixed assets, net book values and narratives. For example, an unflagged £14,162,000 increase in other land and buildings arising between the 2022-23 finalised accounts and then current 2023-24 draft accounts. A later audit findings adjustment reverses the increase by a rounded 14.4 million decrease in the 2023-24 final accounts. The journalised adjustment incongruously contains two £3,400,000 debit items, not reciprocal debit and credit. The adjustment explanation regarding a school converted to an academy in the prior year not being derecognised discloses a concerning initial fundamental error. It also indicates the 2023-24 draft accounts were prepared referencing 2022-23 draft accounts figures. The latter would not adequately explain further irregularities within the 2023-24 draft accounts fixed assets notes, nor identified similar irregularities between the audited final 2021-22 and 2022-23 accounts. The next statement is in relation to agenda item 9 and is from Craig Beavers on behalf of himself and Gail Mayhew. Dear councillors, as the former executive directors of BCP Future Places Limited, we fully support an independent investigation into the company. We would be pleased to give evidence in person or in writing on the serious issues that need to be considered. Some of what we say will be surprising to residents and members. We understand that the council is having problems locating original Future Places documents and most senior employees have left. Without our input, much will not be available to the investigation. Further, we are concerned that the investigation will simply be officers marking their own homework. There is a need for openness and accountability. If we are not called, then members and residents may want to ask why this is. Whose interest is being served by excluding our evidence? What don't they want made public? We look forward to giving evidence in due course. And the final statement is from Mr. Philip Gatchell and is in relation to agenda items 11 and 12. Observations concerning assets vulnerability, physical verification, tracking software. Laptops expenditure reported to Cabinet on the 5th of February 2025 was 2022-23 £760,000, 2023-24 £822,000, total £1,582,000.
£888,304 capitalised costs for 2023-24 regarding laptops and other mobile IT equipment and cellular phones were stated in answer to my unambiguous question on the 27th of February 2025, requesting those assets cumulative cost at 31st of March 2024. Assuming that answer conformed with my question and factoring in Council's latest estimated 5 years laptop lifespan, a material irreconcilable assets cost decrease arises at 31st March 2024 relative to the Cabinet figures. Because although the £888,304 includes non-laptop equipment, £1,582,000 was incurred on laptops alone between the 1st of April 2022 and 31st of March 2024. If in fact £888,304 was the cost of all the defined equipment purchased in 2023-24, reconciliation anomalies still arise, given an awareness also of the previous IT assets major fraud. Further bearing in mind projected lifespans and Council's laptops replacement programme totalling £1,515,000 for 2024-25 and 2025-26. Thank you very much. So moving on to item 8, the External Auditor Audit Plan 2024-2025. Sorry, Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask Democratic Services to circulate members of the committee with the responses to the public questions at the start of that agenda item? Thank you.
Certainly. I'd be grateful if you did so. Thank you. Okay, if nothing else, moving on to item 8, Audit Plan 2024-2025. I see Mr. Barber here as well, as also the our new External Auditor representative, Barry Morris. Welcome to you both. Who's going to start?
With your permission, me, Chair.
Please do. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. I do appreciate that my final meeting of this committee was initially intended to be the February meeting. I am attending today in my capacity as the appointed auditor for 23-24, just to provide you with a brief further update on all things 23-24 before I hand over to my colleague Barry Morris to talk you through the 24-25 plan. At the previous meeting that I attended in February, I did explain that I wasn't in a position to conclude the 23-4 audit until we'd completed our consideration of an outstanding objection and also completed our work in relation to whole government accounts, which was a national issue affecting all councils for 23-24. The said objection was referred to in the public statements, and that objection, I'm pleased to say, has now been considered. And as alluded to in that statement, I did conclude and did communicate to both the objector and the council on the 31st of March 2025 that no further action was necessary and that the payment, in our view, was not ultra vires. So that leaves one remaining area in relation to 23-24, and that's the National Audit Office's coverage of whole government accounts. And unfortunately, we are still not in a position where the NAO have confirmed categorically that they will not request any further work to be undertaken by us at any local government audit for 23-24. And as a result, I'm not in a position to issue my certificate confirming completion of the audit until that has been concluded. Just for complete clarity, that is an issue facing all councils and it is not BCP specific. The only other important thing I wanted to bring to attention of the committee in relation to 23-24 is in relation to fees. Within the audit findings report that I presented to committee in February and also referenced in the plan, the 24-25, the plan that Barry will introduce shortly, I do refer to the anticipated fee for 23-24 of 489,979. We have now received the final fee and confirmation from public sector audit appointments, which includes an uplift of that fee of 4,560, and this reflects a higher charge in relation to the use of our own auditors experts that we bring in to give us advice around asset valuations. So what that does to the final figure is increase it to a new figure of 493,539, and I would be very grateful if that could be minuted in the minutes of this meeting in due course. So, Chair, that is a very brief canter through 23-24. Unless there are any questions on those points, I will now pass over to Barry, who will no doubt introduce himself and talk to you about the substantive item.
Thank you, Barry. Please go ahead. Oh, okay, wait 1 second. Councillor Phipps would like to come in on that point before you start.
I just want to ask, whether, because it relates to 23-24, we just heard a public statement from Mr. Gattrell about 23-24 on officers' loss of office compensation, 37,500. I presume you were listening to this special severance payments. I just wonder if you had any comment on that statement, just as it relates to that year.
Through you, Chair, if I may.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, so as set out in my response to both the objector and the council of the 31st of March 2025, our review of this payment led us to conclude that there was no ultra vires element within the compensation and that no remedial action was required.
Councillor Butt.
Hello, Peter. It's nice to see you again. I haven't seen you for quite a while. Back in the day, this issue about you not being able to issue a certificate. Now, I haven't been on the audit committee for a while, but that was an issue when I was last on the audit committee. I just wondered, had there been, is it because it's now happened again, or has that been ongoing? The reason for the certificate not to be able to be issued, could you advise how long this has been ongoing? You tell us it's a governmental issue, and as to whether the minister is able to resolve this as soon as possible, because you, in one breath, you tell us about the fact that you're unfortunately unable to issue a certificate, and then you tell us of an uplift in the fee. So it's a little concerning that we're not actually getting what we indeed may be paying for. I'd be grateful if you could answer that question. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, through you, Chair, again. Yeah, thank you for that question. So there are a number of reasons why we may need to hold out open the certificate. And I've given two examples today in terms of outstanding objections and the whole government accounts process. It's fair to say that the NAO have struggled in recent years to conclude that the whole government accounts are materially accurate, and that's been driven in part by a number of councils not producing complete and accurate and timely accounts that were subject to audit by the deadlines. And therefore, over recent years, they have been holding open the opportunity to dig deeper into sets of accounts via the auditors to get that assurance. So it is absolutely a national issue. It's not something that's BCP specific. We are hopeful that that will be resolved shortly. From recollection, I think it was resolved around this time last year, where the NAO were in a similar position. And then just particularly on your second point around the fees, I am confident that one final aspect will not result in any further adjustments to that fee for 23-24, and I'm happy to have that minuted.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually in relation to the fee levels, not questioning, whether it is the right level of fee, but I wonder if it would have been useful for us, and more particularly for our residents, to actually understand how that fee sits against fees for other similar sized councils, because I don't know whether 490 something thousand pounds is a lot of money. But if we're having to make significant cuts, that's a lot of money to not understand if that's similar to other sized councils, if it's based on per head of population or risk. I'm not quite sure I've got that, and I don't know if we can add anything to help residents.
Yep, through you, Chair, again, if I may. All fees are driven by a scale fee determined by public sector audit appointments every year, and there will be revisions to that scale fee, normally upwards, to reflect any additional procedures over and above the anticipated minimum audit procedures that an audit team needs to require to discharge their responsibilities. So all those scale fees for the current year, 24-25, and prior years, is absolutely available on the public sector audit appointments website. And what we seek to do within our communications, and it will be the case in the plan that you'll be presented shortly, and in our audit findings report, what we seek to do is provide a breakdown of any changes between the scale fee and the final fee and explain that in more detail. Rest assured that we are subject to significant challenge by public sector audit appointments for any of those fee variations between scale fee and proposed fee, and they will, where appropriate, and have done for BCP for a number of years, sought to understand the extent of that additional work by meeting with us and discussing in detail the contents of our audit work and our files. So those will be the main changes, but inevitably a lot of these additional fees are driven by changes in auditing and accounting standards. So things like IFRS 16 will no doubt be discussed when Barry introduces his plan as an example of where there is further uplifts. But I am comfortable that the fee is comparable with organisations of your size and complexity. And hopefully the PSAA analysis will provide that.
Thank you. Yes, as you were speaking, I was thinking if there's a clear way for us as a committee to see that comparison set out for similar councils. If you have a suggestion as to a useful way that might be presented to us, that would be helpful.
Chair, as I said, I think the PSA website would absolutely provide that, and I'm no doubt there will be somebody within the council who could quite easily manipulate the spreadsheet. I think it is an Excel spreadsheet that holds all that information for every financial year, that no doubt would be easily made into some sort of information paper that may be of use to the council and this committee in providing that comparison.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bartlett, you've been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask a question regarding Mr. Barber's statement on the 2023-24 audit, where he responded to Mr. Gatrell's statement, I think. Mr. Gatrell's statement actually raised two issues. One was, which he accepts, that the payment amount was not ultra vires. However, the other element of the point that he's making is that the council would have been required to have approved the payment, not the amount necessarily. And I'm not sure that aspect of what Mr. Gatrell has raised has been addressed. I don't recall the monitoring officer leaving with consent of council, and the payment was for lot of office, which would indicate that there was some kind of agreement there that would have required council's approval. So could Mr. Barber just comment on that aspect of the issue that Mr. Gatrell has raised, accepting what he says and agrees with, that the amount was actually within the rules?
Through you, Chair, if I may. So I will refer again to my comment about my response to the objector of the 31st of March. Clearly, in considering an objection, and I did accept this objection for further work, I have considered all concerns raised in that objection, and have concluded, as set out previously, that objection and that issue is now closed as a result of my response. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to consider any new or emerging points that are being raised at a subsequent period. And I am confident that I've responded appropriately to all the concerns raised in that initial communication.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Slade.
I'm sorry to come back. I don't want to stray into this year because I realise that's Barry, but because this relates to last year, I wonder if I'm able to ask a question. In the document, it says the 23-24 auditor judgment, there were some areas of risk there. And then Barry presumably will talk about the next year and the impact. But with the one relating to governance, it says no significant weaknesses identified, which is reassuring. But I wonder whether you can just clarify for me, in that year, 23-24, presumably the audit work included the council arrangements around BCP Future Places, because that took place in that year. I just want to cover it now before we lose you and move on to the next item. Did it include that? Because if it did, it says no significant weaknesses identified. I think that's relevant for future items.
Through you, Chair, if I may. So I think, Councillor, you're referring to our value for money conclusions in relation to 23-24, which were also brought in their final form to the February meeting of committee. And whilst I don't have that particular report open in front of me, my recollection is that governance was deemed, whilst there were a number of areas for improvement, that generally the view was for the council as a whole that arrangements were effective. Now, value for money means lots of things to lots of people, but for us it's based on the NAO code, and that sets out the areas to focus on. It is risk based, and from recollection we did comment in the 23-24 Auditor's Annual Report on BCP Future Places, amongst other areas. And in arriving at our judgment in the areas of governance, we considered that and our other work to arrive at that rounded view. And no doubt Barry will articulate what areas we might be focusing on for 24-25 as part of our work in the current year.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
Thank you. My question was perhaps for both of you, which is just about the consequences of not getting a certificate for that year on this year's audit. So I'm not sure which of you is best placed to answer that, but perhaps Mr. Morris, you could include that in your comments.
Shall I take over, Chair, if I may, and we can release Pete. But just to be clear, whilst he may be gone, he won't be forgotten, because he does still work in the office next to me most of the time. So just to turn to that question, Chair, as Pete's alluded, I think there were 5 councils where the audit certificate have already been given, and that's because those audits were completed by the 30th of September. Any audit that was completed after that date, all those certificates will be still open. And indeed, there's some where the accounts still haven't been received. So this is a national issue. This isn't a BCP issue. So we can't envisage that there will be any implications for this, because it's being held open purely because the National Audit Office have said that we're unable to certify the closure of the accounts yet. So that any implications would apply to everybody in the local government sector, bar 5. So I can't imagine there will be any implications.
Thank you.
Of course. This just sounds very historic and very familiar to me. So my question wasn't got answers how long this is going on, but what risk does this not having a certificate open us to? Perhaps on a national level, but it's not supposed to happen. What's supposed to happen isn't happening. So what is the risk management of this absenteeism of a certificate, so to speak? How long can it continue? And back in the day when I was on audit, it was happening then. Now, there may have been, I wasn't asked, there may have been a gap where everything was fine, but how long has it been going? I think the committee probably know, actually. It's probably only me that doesn't, because I haven't sat on this committee for a while. But I'd be grateful if you could advise on that. And what risk are we opening ourselves to any risk by not having our certificate signed and sealed financially? Thank you.
So again, if I may, through the chair, so this is a national issue. This isn't something that's within our control, and it's not something within the council's control. We have to follow the instructions that are provided to us by the National Audit Office. And at the moment, they have said that we are unable to certify the closure of the accounts. Now, technically, whilst the accounts are still open, that may mean that there may be further issues that can be brought to our attention that may impact the financial statements. Now, a great example of that would be if there was a global event that we then needed to consider that would have a material impact on the closing balances at the 23-24. That's I would say it's highly unlikely to happen, but if it did happen, then that would impact all local government entities where no certificate has been given, which, as I've explained, is about 99% of those entities. We do hope that the NAO will conclude their procedures soon and enable us to issue that certificate, which will close the matter down. But honestly, members, there's nothing that we can do to influence it. It really is in the hands of the NAO.
And just that one little point, how long has this been going on? That's still not answered.
So the 23-24 audit certificates have been held open since the deadline, as it were, of the certification of the accounts or publication of the accounts was the 30th of September last year. Audit certificates have been given for all prior years under the backstop arrangements. So it is only where an audit hasn't or an opinion hasn't been given because accounts haven't been made available, the certificates have been held open, or where there are other significant items at a council which precludes the audit being concluded. But in other respects, it will just relate to those councils where the audit was not concluded by the 30th of September 2024.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Barry, would you like to present on this year's?
I will. Thank you very much, Chair. And if I may just indulge me for a couple of moments. So Peter isn't coming off the audit because he's done anything wrong. He's served a good amount of time working for BCP. And as you'll be aware, under ethical restrictions, there's a limited amount of time that people can work on an audit. And therefore, Pete and I have had to do a bit of a swap around of some of our clients because we both got to, well, in my case, I've got to the limit, and it seemed appropriate that I would take on the audit for BCP, and Pete is taking on some of my audits as a sort of swap, if you will. But as I said, Pete will continue to be there. So if there are any issues or historical issues that I need to discuss with Pete, then you can be confident that I will continue to knock on his door. I'm also ably supported by Katie Wyvery, who's also on this call. So she has been the audit manager for a couple of years. And again, sitting underneath Katie is Adams, who has also been the in-charge auditor for the last year or so on the audit. So you do have some continuity, just a fresher face, perhaps we can say that, sitting at the top of the team. Now, we've talked there about the audit certificate remaining open, and there's been significant issues within the audit of local authority accounts. And that's why on page 28, we talk about the local audit reform, where the government has taken significant action to remove all those open years of account, introduce the backstop arrangements, and try to move the sector forward so that we can have safe and reliable financial reporting and assurance in a more timely way. Now, you'll appreciate that your 22-23 accounts were backstopped and therefore disclaimed, but the audit and a full audit was completed in 23-24. And whilst there was a disclaimer of opinion, that was only over the opening balances that you had. So Katie and I will continue to work with the council and your officers to move to a position where we can get back into a position of providing unqualified audit opinions, although we are working with our regulators to determine what work will need to be done so that we can recover that position over time. Page 29 sets out a number of areas which are impacting the authority from a national perspective. You don't need me to tell you it's a significantly challenging environment out there with a whole range of different challenges around housing, funding, adult social care, education, the SEND challenges. So operating in this environment impacts both us from a value for money perspective and also from the financial statements perspective. There are some new accounting requirements that are coming in this year. The most significant of those relates to IFRS 16 relating to leases. Now, local government has been given a holiday from these new requirements for a number of years, but 24-25 is the year when those those assets are now going to be accounted for. So we'll be doing specific procedures around IFRS 16 and the leases to ensure that all leases have been captured, so the completeness test, and then also making sure that the valuation of those lease liabilities and the right of use asset have been brought through to the balance sheet appropriately. I'll now hand over to Katie to talk you through the identified significant risks that we have, but these are mainly, should be familiar to you from prior years, and then I'll return to you at the end to touch on the subject of fees.
Thank you, Barry. So our audit plan sets out the main areas of focus for the financial statements in the value for money audits, and I'm pleased to be able to talk you through this briefly in terms of our proposed approach for 24-25. So Barry's already mentioned one change that's impacting 24-25 being the implementation of IFRS 16. Another change that we have this year is a change to our auditing standards for the groups. This means we've had the opportunity to reconsider our approach to the group audit and the procedures that we'll be undertaking in respect of this. The council will be consolidating Quay into the accounts for the first time this year, as it's now 100% owned by the council, and so this change is also reflected in our group risk assessment, where we will need to undertake some specific procedures in respect of this. Other than those two areas, the main focus for the financial statements audits are as they have been in previous years. So we have the valuation of land and buildings and investment properties. As you're aware, we focus on these areas given the significance of the balances and the significant assumptions and estimation used to determine these values. Similarly, the valuation of the pension fund net liability, where we rely on the work of the pension fund auditors, as well as undertaking our own procedures in relation to the data and assumptions used by the council's actuary. Grant Thornton continue to be the auditors of Dorset Pension Fund, so we will be working with their auditors to ensure an appropriate timeline for completion of the work will be completed in line with our timeline for the council's audit. And finally, we have management override of control, which is a risk present in all organisations. And this is where we focus on significant judgments and estimates and areas on the accounts where we believe they are susceptible to management manipulation. Our IT audit strategy will focus on the design effectiveness of the council's main financial systems and systems that feed the accounts. We will also focus on system implementation of the migration to Capita Cloud, which took place during the year. Our materiality levels have changed from the prior year due to changes in the firm's overall assessment of local government bodies. It means that we have increased our materiality for the council. So for 24-25, we have an overall materiality of 18.9 million for the council. Moving on to value for money, our review will focus mainly on the risk areas which we identified in the prior year, so particularly in relation to financial sustainability, as well as undertaking risk-based work within the other two areas that we have to focus on, which is governance and improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. Barry, pass back to you.
Thank you, Katie. So we will look to deliver the audit, as Katie said, as set out on the logistics slide. And we'll look to do a blended approach of both on-site work and remote work as well, to try to complete the audit as efficiently as we possibly can. Our fee estimate is set out on page 58. Now you'll note there that the scale fee is just over £469,000. Now Katie did allude to the fact that there will be additional work in relation to IFRS 16 and ISA 600 in relation to groups. We've not included an estimate of those fees because it really depends how much work is required in relation to those areas, but we will bring that in the audit findings report and can keep the audit committee updated through our progress reports as we go through the year. As Pete said, all audit fees are scrutinised by Public Sector Audit Appointments Limited to ensure that any fee variations are appropriate. If I may, I'll just return to one of the previous questions that Pete's answered, which is how does the fee for BCP compare? Pete has said that that information is readily available through the public website of PSAA. If your Democratic Services officer would like some support in getting that analysis, then if they'd like to reach out to us, then we can help provide that information to them. Happy to take any further questions, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Very clear and helpful. I have two questions to start off. First one, I've been concerned for some time about the impact of what's happened in recent years on your ability to get assurance over the starting position. So if you could talk a little bit about how you're going to tackle that in this year's and the challenges there. And then my second question is on the value for money arrangements. It mentions financial stability as well as unaddressed recommendations. And I wanted to check, does that mean that you'll be looking at how well the council responds to internal audit recommendations? Or have I misunderstood that one? Those are my two questions.
Thank you, Chair. So to the second one first, yes, we will be following up all prior year recommendations to see what action the council is taking to address those, both those that have been raised by ourselves as external auditors and in relation to internal audit. And again, we will be looking from a financial sustainability perspective at the longer term financial plans that the council has put in place to ensure that it delivers financial sustainability. Chair, I was then so focused on your second question. Please could you remind me what the first one was?
The starting position for this year's
The
audit and
European
the challenges around that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one of my other hats and roles that I have is I'm the partner that leads our public sector audit team, and we've been working really closely with our regulators as to actually how do you recover the opening balances position when you've effectively got a year where there's no audit work that's been undertaken. It's fair to say that that guidance is still being worked through. The council, however, is in the best possible position other than having audited accounts because there is only that 1 year of missing assurance. We have a number of authorities which we've inherited where there are a number of years which have not been audited. So we are looking at what procedures we need to do to recover that assurance over time. Now, other than doing an audit of those years or the missing year, which clearly wouldn't be efficient and not a good use of public money, we need to make sure that as we do the in-year balances each year, so for 23-24, we started that rebuilding process. In 24-25, we'll further rebuild and regain that assurance. There will be a point in time where we can say we have sufficient assurance that actually an unmodified opinion will be given. That probably won't happen for 24-25. It may be possible in 25-26 or 26-27. But as I said, it's a national issue that all firms are working through with the regulators and with the with PSA.
Thank you very much. Can I invite our independent person to come in now?
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions on the plan. On page 38, you talk about significant risks. You made a comment that you are rebutting the risk of fraud in revenue and expenditure. And I just wanted to know what additional procedures did you perform or what did you look at to come to that conclusion that you are going to rebut the potential of fraud? And then on page 47, on the lower materiality figure, you are looking at a lower figure for senior management remuneration. And then I wanted to know whether you've considered looking at a lower materiality figure for related party transactions, fraud and irregularities, and compliance-driven disclosures. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those questions. So in relation to the rebuttal of fraud in both revenue and expenditure cycles, the ISAs have rebuttable and non-rebuttable risks, as you'll be aware. So management override we can't rebut, but we do look at the underlying nature and controls that are in place, and also the types of expenditure and revenue that are received by the council. And what we consider is that actually the overall control environment that's in place and the nature of the transactions are very difficult for fraud to be undertaken. So therefore, we rebut the overall assumption that there will be fraudulent transactions within there. Having said that, we still undertake significant procedures, both around revenue and expenditure, to consider that the expenditure and revenue has been accurately recorded in the accounts. And we are mindful that fraud may be prevalent at any point or may be present at any point. So the fact that we've rebutted the overall consideration doesn't mean that we don't undertake procedures to check that that there is any expenditure and any revenue is appropriately supported within the accounts. In terms of the lower materiality levels, we set a lower materiality level for senior officers because we believe that's an area of heightened focus. The whole approach is designed around making sure that the disclosures are appropriate. So we look at all disclosures to make sure that the prevailing statement of recommended practice that's produced by CIPFA have been followed in relation to the disclosures. And as I said, any transaction where we identify fraud, it would be very difficult to separately identify specific materiality for that, because that's why we're setting materiality as a whole, is to identify any material frauds or any material errors that we have. Does that help?
Chair, can I do a follow-up question? So on the significant risks with the rebuttal of fraud, how is your view, or what is your view on other governmental or government departments or local authorities in the country? Is this a blanket approach that you as external auditor rebut fraud on all government entities? That's my one follow-up. And then the second follow-up, yes, I agree with your lower materiality figure for the remuneration of senior management. However, the question was, why don't you consider, or do you consider lower materiality for related party transactions and for compliance-driven disclosures? You did touch on fraud. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So there is a presumption in our national approach, because many organisations and entities, local government entities, are fairly homogenous in their activities. So that's why we rebut revenue and expenditure cycle having fraudulent transactions. However, there may be circumstances that arise in other entities where we are aware that fraud may have been undertaken, or that there are control deficiencies that have been identified either through our own work or through the work of other parties, such as internal audit, which indicate that there is an enhanced risk of fraud or fraudulent transactions. Where we are aware of that, then we would not necessarily rebut the risk of fraud in either revenue or expenditure transactions. So there is a presumption, but then that is specifically tailored based on our previous experience of the entity that we're auditing and the council that we're auditing. In relation to the lower materiality, we have considered it in relation to related parties. We haven't set a lower materiality in relation to that, or in relation to the other disclosures that you've mentioned, but we will always have that as part of our audit skepticism when we undertake our work.
Thank you. Councillor Slade, did you?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, and it may, by all means, Barry, if it's not you, it may well be that it's internal. I need to get an answer on this. The first one is, in terms of, at the beginning of the report, it talks about the context and the landscape. And I'm just wondering, in the national landscape, why the broader national landscape and the international landscape aren't put down as part of the risk and context. I'm thinking about interest rates, growth, tariffs, international conflict. None of that's mentioned, and that must be a risk for councils just as much as things like you know, staffing and climate change and housing. If they're there, why aren't the big picture things there? And then the other two, which are the second one relates to fees. So the scale fee for last year was 433 and it ended up being 489. That's a 13% increase. If the proposed fee is 469 this year, if you extrapolate that up, it would end up being 529. My question is how much we have in our budget for this and whether we're going to end up with an overspend. So it's probably a question for Adam or somebody internally. And the second one is around the IRFS 16 leases. Declaring an interest as someone who's trying to do a community asset transfer of a very small organisation. But if those that have leases that would normally have had a peppercorn rent are now going to be included in the balance sheet, I'm nervous about that change and whether that then puts in the spotlight small organisations who've been bumbling along at peppercorn rent that suddenly are going to go on balance sheet, and the council are then going to change their attitude towards them, and whether we're going to see all sorts of organisations suddenly going, oh, hang on, we can make a bit of money out of you, when these groups have been sustained in our communities across the whole of BCP for some cases decades. So I'm slightly nervous about any knock-on implications for community buildings and small community organisations from this change. And I realise it's not a change you have any option over, but it's how we respond to that change that I'm concerned about.
Thank you. If I may, through you, Chair, so a couple of responses, and then I may throw over to officers in the room. In relation to macro risk, you're absolutely right. There are a lot of national risks that are out there. So you mentioned there around interest rate rises specifically. So again, we will consider that as part of our value for money work and around financial sustainability to ensure that that's appropriate and there are realistic assumptions that are being made in there. There are some things, and again, we've referenced climate change on page 29, which is a sort of a national stroke international consideration. We do consider the impact of international conflicts, but again, it's not an area that we've considered is significant. But of course, there may be further ramifications as a result of that, where there may be additional costs that are feeding through to the council. So again, you might consider that a little bit more in some council areas rather than others, particularly where there's high levels of asylum seekers, which may increase as a result of that. But actually, what we're trying to do here is focus down on those risks that may have a direct bearing on the financial statements and on the value for money arrangements for the council. And I suppose we have to be fairly selective as to what we put in here. Similarly, our work on governance and DFM will be looking at the council's risk management arrangements to see the extent to which they are considering those risks as well that are out there, the international and macroeconomic risks. In relation to the fees, it's a really good question. So what PSAA do each year is they look at the scale fee and consider how much of any fee variations that have been previously reported are then baked in effectively into the revised scale fee. So you will see that the scale fee for 24-25 has gone up compared to the scale fee for 23-24. And that's because of those fees that have previously led to that, the fee variations. Those have now been effectively baked in. So we won't be coming for those again because they was already in the 469,000. As we've said, the two bits that aren't included within there is in relation to the IFRS 16 work and the ISA 600 work, because we just don't know how much work is going to be required as a result of that. And our experience across authorities are some are very well prepared, and if they've got clear records which are easy to follow, and there's a clear audit trail around making sure that all leases have been captured and the valuation procedures are robust, then that will lead to a lesser amount of work than one which has left it to the last minute. They don't really know what leases they've got out there. They haven't got a clue how to value them, then that will require a lot more work. So that's why we've left it as It's something that we've not included within that fee, but we will be bringing back to you as part of our audit findings work, not only the fee implications, but also what we found in relation to those management arrangements. Please may I hand over to officers to answer the other elements of your questions in relation to fees.
Chair, if I may, I'll take that question in the sense that what I'd like to do is be given the opportunity to check back exactly the amount that's in our 25-26 budget. What I anticipate is it's sufficient to cover the initial fee, but clearly if it then increases because there's additional work, that would be matter that we would report back to Cabinet through the budget monitoring process.
Thank you. Did you want to come back on that?
Is that okay? Can I ask that you confirm that figure for members of the committee? Because, you know, whilst I accept what Grant Thornton have said, if you've allowed 469 and it ends up being 529 or even 500, the portfolio holder sat next to you is going to be asked to find £30,000 from somewhere else. And we're talking later about spending huge amounts of money on things. £30,000, you know, could be spent on another issue. But can I ask for an answer to my other question? I'm aware of an organisation in my ward, not one that I'm involved with, where over a year it's taken for me to have somebody tell me how we contact the people who have the lease and getting updates on how that lease is operating, which fills me with huge dread when Barry has just told us this. We're going to be looking at how well prepared the council is. I could give you a list of leases in my ward alone where we probably have no information, and I can see other people who are going, yes, same there. So that fills me with dread.
Thank you. Councillor Beasley, did you?
Thank you very much, Chair. And I welcome the dialogue, particularly around fees and the unintended consequences of increased fees. And I hope that early warning will be coming through via Mr. Morris to the council about any further additional fees in the future. My questions are on page 16 of your audit plan report, I think renumbered number 40 as far as the council's report is concerned. And this concerns the valuation of the pension fund net liability. Really, I think my question is in two parts. The first one is that obviously there have been changes at Dorset in terms of their external auditors, and it, I believe, has moved from Deloitte and is now Grant Thornton, but presumably a slightly different part of Grant Thornton. And we were all aware of the problems that delay has caused when it was on Deloitte's watch. So I'm asking, I think, for you to explain how is that going to work, given that both audits are through Grant Thornton and that we've suffered delay because of the pension fund liabilities in the past. That's had a big impact here on BCP Council over a long period of time. And of course, I'm sure Mr. Barber has fully briefed you on the background to that. But when I read that page, I'm not clear as to how that is going to work in practice. And you might like to give us a sort of overall picture of that. The second one concerns the Dorset Pension Fund's actuaries, who, as you all know, Barnett Waddington. There are in the LGPS world probably only 3 or 4 sets of actuaries who work across virtually all the funds, and Barnett Waddington are probably the second biggest or most widely used. And your questions around the audit procedures talk about at bullet point 2, I think, sorry, 3, bullet point 3, assessing the competence, capabilities and objectivity of the actuary who carries out the authority's pension fund valuation. And then on the other hand, bullet point 4, you're talking about assessing the accuracy and completeness of information provided by the authority, that is Dorset, to the actuary. And I'm intrigued as to how you balance that in terms of the information flow and its accuracy, on which you then rely to give your opinion through the procedures. And I suppose as an adjunct to that, what comparisons you do across the LGPS world as to the work of Barnett Waddington and the other funds for which they are actuaries. Sorry, there are rather a lot of questions in there, but I think you understand the continuity.
Thank you, Councillor Beasley, and again through the chair, I'll try and answer some of those questions. If I miss any, then please do come back to me, and I'm sure Katie will jump in if necessary. So I think the answer to the first one is a little bit more straightforward. There were issues with Deloitte. The audit for Dorset Pension Fund is now undertaken. Whilst I'm not the engagement lead, it is one of my directors within my team, and therefore I am acutely aware of the progress of the audit, and there is fairly robust discussions if the work isn't being delivered in line with the timetable to make sure that audits are able to be signed off. And again, I'm pleased to say that in 23-24, we made really great strides in making sure that audit work was completed in a timely way, to make sure that audits could be signed off. And again, you'll be familiar with the fact that we did sign off the 23-24 audit by the backstop date. And we would look to continue to improve that going forward as the timetable moves forward. So it's not undertaken by me, but it is undertaken by somebody that works in my team and reports to me. In relation to the Barnett Waddington, we use PwC as external audit experts, as do all audit firms. So they are engaged on a national level by PSAA and the National Audit Office to provide assurances. And they are the ones that perform those top level reviews around the competence, capabilities and objectivity of the actuary, to make sure that the assumptions that they are using are appropriate, consistent with the expectations that they have around over the assumptions. And they do also, as you say, make that comparison between the different actuarial firms to make sure that where there's differences, what is the reason for that? And perhaps not unexpectedly, there will always be differences by the different actuaries. Where that falls out of line with our expectations and their expectations, we then follow that up both with the actuary, but also the council, because there may be an example of where a council has a particular type of workforce. It may be younger than other comparable authorities, and therefore we would expect that to be reflected through. In the fourth bullet point there, you said about the assessing the accuracy and completeness of the information provided by the authority to the actuary. So there, what we're doing is looking to make sure that timely and appropriate information and complete information is handed over by BCP to Dorset, and then that gets transferred over to the actuary to enable them to make a realistic estimate of the liability. So actually, if up-to-date information isn't being followed through, then the actuary won't be able to provide an accurate estimate of the liability. So that's why we're looking at that flow of information from BCP to make sure that the information is flowing through so that that can provide an informed liability position. Or indeed, we keep saying liability. We have been in the world as we talk about IFRIX 14 there at the penultimate bullet point, where a number of pension funds have moved into an asset position. So that's a piece of other work that we've been doing over the last couple of years, is looking as to whether or not the asset ceiling has been calculated correctly. Councillor Beattie, did that answer most of your questions?
Yes, through you, Chair, I think it does. I think what's still lurking there at the back of my mind is your satisfaction with the approach taken by Barnett Waddington, because different actuarial firms in the LGPS world have different approaches. And what that means in practice for us as BCP Council and the liabilities for which we're ultimately responsible within Dorset Fund is, are you satisfied that the approach taken by Barnett Waddington globally in the LGPS is the right one, compared to that might be taken, I won't name the other firms, but might be taken by other firms in that field?
So Councillor Beasley, I can provide you that assurance when I give you my audit findings report, because and again, if you look back at previous audit findings reports, that identifies where the assumptions that have been used by your actuary fall compared to our expectations. So I can't give you that assurance yet, but I can by the time I give the audit opinion.
Thank you, Chairman. That answers my queries at this stage. I look forward to the report.
We have a request from the independent person. Please come in now.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies if this sounds a bit muddled, but it's a slightly new subject for me. So IRF 16, I think you referred to. Okay, and you referred to the fact that the cost for this will be less or more depending on how well prepared BCP are. With that in mind, can I put a question to Mr. Stannard of Internal Audit? Is it on your list, your audit plan for this year, or should it be on your audit plan for this year so that you can be prepared and so that the cost for Grant Thornton come down, or should it be on somebody's plan to progress that to help out financially, really?
Thank you. The later committee agenda items could address that point. What I'll say is that the discussions that we have with management during the year, as that report's going to say, we don't have a very firm audit plan on day one of the financial year. That evolves through the financial year, and given that this is an issue, I would expect that issue to be on our audit plan, and in liaison with management, we would agree what we would do in that sphere.
Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
Councillor Butt.
Thank you, dear. If we go back to the significant risk, which is page 13, I think. Oh, auspicious number. As Councillor Slabe was already alluding to, the man on the Clapham Omnibus out there may be one or two of us listening with regard to the public. Now, we do understand what management override means, and we understand the rebuttals that you've explained to us, okay? But there is one, it's pretty stark, where it says audit team's assessment. So subject to those rebuttals, we have therefore identified management overrides of controls in particular journals, management estimates and transactions outside the course of business as a significant risk of material misstatements. Could you expand on that, please, and provide the assurances which we hope to hear, or explain in detail as to where that might lead us with the element of risk that we face? Thank you.
For the sake of variety, I'm going to bring Katie in to answer this question, and then I can add to it as necessary. So Katie, over to you.
Thank you, Barry. Yeah, so this is a risk at all organisations. So this isn't something we're able to, excuse me, to rebut. Where we say our focus is on, for example, transactions outside of the course of a business as a significant risk. So when we're undertaking our audit work, this will be kind of at the front of our mind in terms of all areas of testing. And if we identify anything where we believe it is outside of the course of business, we'll then focus our work in those areas. Particularly around journals, we undertake some focused testing on journals. We have software which helps us identify any unusual journals, so journals that are posted to codes or to areas where we wouldn't expect them to, any that are posted by people we wouldn't expect, or kind of other factors which would make us think that those journals could have some indication of being unusual, and therefore we would follow those up. Particularly in terms of management estimates, estimation has uncertainty to it and can be impacted by a number of different factors. So any area where there's estimation and that estimation can be used to benefit the council, then again we'll focus on those areas. I guess in terms of the prior year audit, we didn't find any indications of management override of control. Particularly, we did significant work on journals, and there was no indication of any journals identified that suggested there was any management override of controls. But yeah, our work in this area kind of covers throughout the whole audit. We're always having this kind of consideration in terms of how could management manipulate the position of the council.
Again, if I may, through you, Chair. So thank you, Katie, for that detailed response. The only thing that I would add to that is where the council is doing anything that is unusual or for the first time or complex. So where it's setting up new entities, where it's making unusual investments, either in new or unusual investments, or where it's investing in companies. We will look to see what control environment is in place around that and test to make sure that appropriate procedures have been followed. So it's really looking around the complexity and unusual items as well as those areas that Kate has mentioned.
Many thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I see the portfolio holder, Councillor Cox, would like to speak.
Thanks. I just wanted to come in on the question about IFRS 16 and who was preparing for that. In actual fact, a lot of that work will be done by the Finance Department under the auspices of the gentleman on the right. And in fact, a lot of work has already been done to prepare for the audit in that respect. In terms of the internal audit function, that we know, obviously Nigel will decide what he needs to do for that particular function, but in respect of the external audit, a lot of the work will be done by Adam's department. Okay.
Thank you very much. In the interest of moving on, does anybody have any other questions they'd like to put on this item? Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations on your appointment. I wanted to ask a question about the escalation policy, which is on page 68 of the report in the appendices. I was really encouraged to see that, given the conversation that we're having about delays and some of the issues that we experienced last year. I just want to understand, so on step 4 it says escalation to the audit committee at next available audit and governance committee within 6 weeks of deadline. So are we saying that we will have to wait as a committee 6 weeks before any sort of alarm bells are raised with us about any discrepancies? I'm wondering whether as part of this report we could have some kind of more of a visual of, like, if something has occurred and it's now sort of going down the escalation, being treated within the escalation policy, that at least we could have a visual of what those issues are and how far along they are in the escalation process, if that makes sense.
It does, through the chair. So the escalation policy and process that we've set out here is really around the production of the financial statements. So as we've said, there's been a number of delays in the production of financial statements, and some of those authorities have taken a long time to produce accounts, and often we have promises that are made that aren't kept to. And again, what we're trying to do here is set a real clear marker down, which is this isn't just about the auditors not delivering on audits. We can only audit a set of financial statements, obviously, when we have that set of financial statements. So we're taking a harder line that if accounts aren't produced by the statutory deadline, which is the end of June for this year, then we will start to discuss that with initially with the Director of Finance, and then we will escalate up to the Chief Executive within 1 month of the deadline. So, for example, in that case, if we haven't got them by the end of June, we would raise it with the Chief Executive by the end of July. Now, clearly, we're having regular audit committee meetings, and if the accounts haven't been produced, we would raise that issue at the next available audit committee. So, for example, if there was one in July, we would say that we haven't yet received the accounts. We're not anticipating that to be an issue, and really we don't want the escalation process to apply at all, because the accounts should be produced and we should be able to commence our audit work. Now, one thing I would just say about if there is anything concerning that we are identifying as a result of the audit, and we believe that those charged with governance or the chair of the audit committee needs to be made aware of that, we will always do that in the intervening period. So if at any time the chair of the audit committee wants to talk to us, or we want to talk to the chair of the audit committee, we won't just wait to the next audit committee meeting. We will make arrangements to discuss that with them at the earliest opportunity.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear it. If there aren't any more questions for anyone else, thank you very much for that. Welcome to this role and the committee, and thanks once again to Peter for all of your work and support to our committee over recent years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair, and congratulations from us as well.
Thank you. Now, it's recommended the Audit and Governance Committee notes the Grant Thornton External Audit Plan 2024-2025 for the Council. Do we have consensus on that point? Excellent. Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Wade.
Yes, before we move on to the next item, I know we're not quite at our 2-hour break, but I'm just sort of anticipating that it might be a bit chunky and it might be a good idea to take a quick comfort break now if others agree.
Yes.
That seems appropriate. Should we say 5 minutes? Thank you very much. Thank you. Welcome back after our short break. Right, we're moving on now to item 9. This is BCP Future Places Investigation Scope. So as we know, the last meeting in March, we had a long discussion about how to tackle this need for investigation to future places. And we agreed that internal audit would undertake an investigation, and we set out a steer on the approach for that investigation. As it says in this report that we have here, at the conclusion of this investigation by internal audit, there may still be gaps left in understanding. And to be clear, that I personally still have the door open at that point to taking further steps to get more clarity if we feel needed. And we can discuss at that point the best way to do that. But I think it's really urgent that we move on with this promptly and we start asking the questions that we need to hear some answers to promptly. So just before I move on, we have some councillors present who I know wish to speak, who are not members of the committee. I suggest that what we do to make sure that committee members do not feel like they are surprised, I think we should hear from the officers presenting the report. Then we can have a discussion amongst ourselves briefly on that report before letting those councillors come in. But hopefully we won't let them make them wait too long, and then we can return to our debate. Just before we move on, I wanted to make a point of clarity that I think it is incredibly important in the way we talk about the independence of this committee and the way we talk about the independence of the investigations we do. And the language we use around this matters very much. Now, I completely appreciate the public perception, and the public aren't to be expected to understand the way internal audit, external audit, officers, councillors works. I can perfectly understand why the public might not understand that, but we know better. And just to be clear, from my perspective, internal audit is independent of council officers and councillors. And we as a committee are also independent. And for the sake of clarity, the head of audit and management assurance, it's Mr. Stannard here, he reports to us. He doesn't report to the chief executive other than on administrative matters. So as far as I'm concerned, this is an independent investigation. Now, that's not to say internal audit is infallible and we'll uncover everything, but it is independent of council officers and councillors. And I think that's a really important distinction for us to make as we talk about this. So when you present, I think it would be helpful, Mr. Sanad, if you can comment a little bit on that and just how important it is that that independence is maintained and that you do not feel under any pressure. I think that the independence and the objectivity of you in your role is incredibly important. And if there is any doubts cast upon that, then please, can anyone be in touch with myself, with any committee members, and with the external auditors if that's something that is in any doubt. Now, I'm not aware of any reason for that to be in any doubt, but if you do have any doubts about that and the independence and objectivity of our HAMA, please do raise that. As it stands, I'm not aware of any of that, and I'm confident in the independence of our investigator. So with that context, please could you confirm that and that the lack of bias or influence in your approach going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. I will cover that independence element later in my, and I appreciate lots of people probably want to speak on this matter, so I'm going to just try and highlight a couple of key issues, if I may. This scope is your opportunity to determine what you want the investigator, whether it's me or whether it's external, and I know you're going to probably have that debate again, but even an external investigator would need to have a scope. So put aside internal, external for a minute. This is your opportunity to agree the scope. What do you want to be looked at? And going back to, apologies for stating the obvious maybe, but the scope definition in the dictionary is the extent of the area or subject matter which is relevant. So that's what we're trying to do this evening. A number of councillors in the interim since last committee have suggested alternatives or sub-questions. They're all perfectly valid sub-questions. But I don't think they should feature in a scope, because the scope is that overarching top level area of subject matter. What I propose is that I will produce an appendix to the final report with all the questions, sub-questions if you like, that all councillors, Councillor Phipps as an example, Councillor Armstrong as another example, who have sent sub-questions. I'm going to produce an appendix with those questions in, and I'm going to reference where they appear in the report, so we can say, yes, all the questions posed by members have been answered, or no, they haven't been answered, and a bit that Councillor Connolly said earlier, that's an area that we need further assurance on from some other source, because I can't find the answer. So turning to the report itself, if I just go to the top of, bear with me a sec, sorry, my page is stuck. I've alluded to that, what I've just said at the top of page 75. Moving into paragraph 7, I just wanted to reiterate the answer to, I think it was Mr. McKinstry's question earlier around the external sources of information. I'm very pleased to receive external pieces of information, whether it's from committee members, members of the public, or whoever, and I will then consider whether they're relevant to the scope that you've agreed later, when we know what that is. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then in terms of the timelines, I just quickly run through that. Obviously, last committee we talked about 6 months. 6 months from that committee was end of September. You have expressed a preference, and so is the chief executive, that I report before he retires. That isn't September. So I propose in this report that I will produce an interim report to the July Audit and Governance Committee. It might not have all the answers at that stage, because there's a lot to get through, but it will at least give the committee opportunity and officers to respond before the chief exec retires. And then there'll be subsequent mop-up, if required, after that, to subsequent Audit and Governance Committees, but they will be after the chief exec retires. So that's my proposal in this report. And then turning to the independence of internal audit, you'd expect me to make reference to this, and I thank Councillor Connolly for her words. I would just like to draw attention to paragraph 17, and I will immediately tell Councillor Connolly, tell the external auditor, and my professional institute, if anybody in the council tries to influence my reporting. It's almost the worst thing you can say to an internal auditor, that you lack independence. So I hope that reassures people. In terms of what's gone before, I can categorically say that no individual in this council has ever told me what to write or what to put in a report. Yes, people have said, can you look at this for me? Or can you look at that for me? And I might say, yep, sure. Or I might say, no, I think it's better if management do. And we've had those discussions in the past, but nobody has told me what to do or told me what the answer is. What to write or what to report. So I just wanted to really stress that and hope that gives you some assurance on that matter. And I'll leave it at that, because I know a lot of people want to talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of those committee members who have written to us with specific questions that they would like to see included. And I'm really encouraged to hear that you will be listing them very explicitly in the report, so that we can see that you've tackled those questions head on. I see Councillor Salmon wants to speak. I'm very happy to bring you in a second, but I just wanted to check that none of the committee members wanted to speak first, as this was an issue of contention at a previous meeting. I see Councillor Phipps.
Might as well start, mightn't I?
Told me off.
Okay, just a few things I want to say and just clarify. I think you've done a very good job here of clarifying quite a lot already, Nigel, but I potentially may repeat some of it. First of all, I was very pleased to hear in the response to Mr. McKinstry's question that anyone, and that's how I see it, an individual, anyone, can send in evidence to the investigator, who I presume would be Mr. Stannard. Exactly. I'm just clarifying it actually in public here within this meeting. I just think that's really very good. Thank you for that. And presumably they can do that at any time from starting now or whatever, up until I'm not sure when. But anyway, that's the first thing. Okay. The second thing I'm quite pleased about, in your scope at 3.1, you identify the process for the appointment of the company's executives, non-executive directors and other staff based on a question that we just had as well from Mr. McKinstry. So I take it that will apply to all staff, all the directors, whatever, all of them, the whole lot of staff. You will have a look at that. So I'm presuming that's the case, and it's up to you whether you want to, in a moment, say that that will be the case. There are a few other things. If there's other things in here, you may call us sub items or not, I don't know. Shall I just mention, I've got a couple I wanted to add in now, or do I just send them to you?
No, mention them.
At the end of the day, one of them was, and I think I may have raised this before somewhere, I don't know, there's been so much stuff, about what it was the remit of Future Places and whether it went outside its remit, looking at or getting involved in other regeneration projects that weren't necessarily within its remit. I couldn't see it on, I may have missed it because I had a look through and I didn't spot that. So I'm wondering if that could be part of it. And also there appears to be some communication about all sorts of reports and how many reports they actually did, like, you know, for budget reports and things that we had come to council, but some didn't come and they were kept as drafts. Apparently, this is what I'm hearing, you've probably seen this along the way. Is that in here? Those are the two things that I just wanted to flag up particularly. Then, and this I think does refer what you referred to as your sub-matters, that Councillor Armstrong sent round an email to all of us, the whole committee, whoever was on it at the time. There may be the odd person missed because things have changed.
I got it.
But was one, it started off in April and then she followed it up on the 19th of May. You will know which one it was. And it took your report and then it put in green all sorts of other things. And although there were sub issues within your scope, there were actually some other, I think she ended up with quite a lot more actual items, whereas you've got 7 or 8, she ended up with about 11 or something like that. And I'm wondering if that is going to be, you're going to take into account all of that as part of your investigation. I like that because I didn't see an actual response. Sorry if I missed it. There's been so much stuff coming in, and I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah, and then finally, you just mentioned your interim report in July, and could I just ask if, when that comes forward, we will then have the opportunity to, before your final report, to add in other questions or topics or whatever, you know, you've got part of the way, and other things may come to light. We'll be able to add in July. I'll leave it at that at the moment. Thank you. I'm sorry there was quite a lot there, but I was trying to make lists as I went along.
Let me try and do the easier ones first. So in respect of mission creep, scope creep, whatever you want to call it, I'm hoping that is covered at 4.5, which currently reads, was any expenditure or activity incurred by BCP Future Places outside the stated company terms of reference? Now, I can, you know, that's a scope area, and obviously specific questions that you might have already posed, I can fit under that category. The Councillor Armstrong questions in green, again, I see that those fit within the sub-questions area, and I think they fit in the areas that are on this scope. What I would say, and I be careful how I say this because I don't want it to sound, what's the word? There are some elements in some of the questions, not just from Councillor Armstrong, but from others, that would imply that a lot of the elements that Janie Berry provided in the last committee meeting, the reports from the council, for example, and the reports are on BCP Future Places, board minutes and agendas, haven't been read because the answers are there. And I do see that perhaps my report is bringing some of that together in one place. So I might not be telling you what you don't already know, but it feels like the report needs to be the one place where it all is, if that makes sense. And I hope that I haven't offended anybody there by saying they haven't read anything. So then on the July report issue, absolutely, I don't think there may not be a beginning and end to this. So people are free to give me their evidence or their further questions throughout this process until it finishes, as far as I'm concerned.
Could I just come back on? I did mention about these potential draft reports. Will that come under the remit? Where does that come in? How many reports they did on the regeneration projects that they had within their remit, and how many were given to councillors to look at, and what was still outstanding, and where were they, and all the rest. Looking into that, I didn't see that in there.
4.4, detail which projects produced initial and full business cases. So I think 4.4, which currently reads detail which projects produced initial and full business cases. So I think, again, that heading covers all of those, sub questions that might form out of that.
And just to come in on that, I think that a lot of the questions that Councillor Armstrong sent around are very good questions and ones we need answering. And I've particularly liked the one that was drawn out on relationships with other bodies, initiatives and companies. And you pulled that out as a separate subheading. Now, I don't feel strongly whether it's specified in the questions, as long as you're aware that that is something we're going to be wanting to make sure is answered under section 4 as it stands. So in that exactly that question, one of my questions when it comes to the report is going to be about this value for money, who exactly they worked with, and how are we, what did we see for our money, and where we're going with that. So the links to all of the other issues that come before us is important.
It is your prerogative, of course, to disagree with my broad statement that and if you think that there's a section of Councillor Armstrong's formatting that makes sense and you just want it explicitly in the scope, then that's your prerogative, isn't it, as a committee? So I think that's relevant to understand.
Well, I'm looking at section 5 of the document that Councillor Armstrong circulated, relationships with other bodies, initiatives and companies, and it asks a series of questions about relationships. If you can assure us that that is going to be adequately covered under section 4 of your scope, then I'm content. But if members would like that to be pulled out as a specific subheading, I'd be open to that as well. I'm assuming that without that, I think we're comfortable that as long as you know that we are wanting the answers to that's the main thing. Oh, unless Councillor Armstrong, please.
I think I would like that as a separate heading, because I think it is those nuances, those relationships between different, whether that's different initiatives, different delivery vehicles within the council, external bodies. I think that's a really important part of this to explore. whilst I've got the mic, as it were, I just actually really want to acknowledge you, Nigel, for the work of you and your team. I know that you do excellent work, and it's often in difficult circumstances. And I just want to be clear with everybody here, actually, and members of the public, that the points that I've been making throughout since we've started a discussion about future places really come from a genuine place, and that to highlight the potential for conflicts of interest, I don't think is a bad thing. In fact, as a councillor, I think it's my job to speak up about it where I feel concerned. So that's where I've been coming from. I think requesting an externally led scoping exercise, again, it's not a bad thing. I think it's a sensible step, and being able to work out what else might be needed, what gaps there are, what consequences need to happen as a result of the information that's shared. I mean, there is that saying that we don't know what we don't know. So perhaps, unless we have a different lens, or potentially an external lens looking over this, sometimes we don't see the wood for the trees. There's a significant amounts of information that's being shared in the public domain at the moment. I'm really encouraged to hear, Nigel, that you welcome people submitting that to you. I think that's really important, and that would be reassuring for residents to know that they can forward information, and it will be included as part of this investigation. But the risks that we're looking into, they do involve potentially people at senior levels of an organisation. So I was encouraged to see one of the public statements made earlier by a senior member of the staff team, again offering to be part of this process and to be interviewed. And it would be a shame that they would be gagged, as part of this investigation. So I want to emphasise that nothing that I've ever been asked for is intended to interfere with this internal audit currently taking place, or to prevent us from this evening finalising an internal scope. I want to make that absolutely clear. Any contribution that myself, or I know other councillors or in my group may have contributed, is really intended to try and simplify and strengthen the process by ensuring it's clear and independent, and that it's equipped and fit for purpose to be able to address these broader issues that are being raised. My final point that I want to make on this is that when we met in March, as a committee, we faced a dilemma about voting for this as an external inquiry. And the main sort of barrier that was put across was that there was no budget allocated for such an investigation. And we were told that to get that funding, it'd have to be requested through Cabinet. There'd have to be a business case, and Councillor Cox, with his portfolio holder hat on, indicated that Cabinet wouldn't be open to that. So I think that's an area that has been missed, the issue of business case in relation to being able to fund an independent inquiry. I don't think it's been fully sort of explored within this forum, and I'd certainly be very happy to work with any members of this committee to produce such a business case, because I think, being able to provide that, and I know I have to be careful with the words, but that additional assurance, almost like a bolt and braces kind of approach, I think is really important here. This is like we're talking about significant amounts of money, and the public interest, residents, very highly interested to be following this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Butt, I think you indicated you wanted to speak next.
Sorry, with regard to the business case to be put forward for take this outside into an independent inquiry, I can see where that could be in the public interest. I can see that the man on the Clapham Omnibus again might think, well, it should be outside, we shouldn't be judge and jury. But I really think in this case, we do need to be able to look at this first ourselves, because if we don't, and it goes to a business case and it's going to be horrendously expensive, my first question will be, why didn't we look at it ourselves? Mm-hmm. Why did we not negate and mitigate all those issues that we could do? Because it may be this still ends up in the as an external inquiry, but there will be a lot less perhaps for that external inquiry to have to look at, because Nigel will have already dealt with an awful lot of those reasons. And if there are things which are absolutely insurmountable and it cannot be done internally, then I think that's the time to say, okay, and then look to Adam and to Councillor Cox and say, you know, we're needing some more money here, and then look at that then. But until we've exhausted, I think, this internal scope, I don't think that externally it really has a place. Thank you.
Thank you, and I very much agree with that. I am not against seeking external support for this, and if we think needed, but I do think it's important that we take this on ourselves in the first instance. I should have done this previously. Councillor Armstrong, would you actually move that your suggested questions on relationships with other bodies, initiatives and companies be added to the scope? Would you like to propose that?
Yes, I would like. Thank you, Chair. I would like to propose that. Would anyone care to second?
I'd be happy to second that. I think it's one of the questions we'll want answered, so it's no harm to make that clear in the scope.
Chair, can I just, I've not had sight of that, so if somebody could send me a copy or just the proposals that you are wanting to be added, that'd be very helpful.
Yep, it's a new subsection entitled Relationships with Other Bodies, Initiatives and Companies, and it specifies 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions which we can circulate. Basically just making sure that we want to see the links between Future Places and other companies. So I think it's important in that we understand this map of how it all fits together and all the things that come before us.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have, Nigel?
Thank you. Could I just make sure there's no avoidance of doubt on something that Councillor Armstrong said? So at paragraph 7, first bullet point, how I see it and what I think you agreed last time is that we wouldn't be doing interviews. What we're asking is evidence, and if people want to send me things to look at within the scope, I will. And any interviews or any conversations with people is a down the line, as Councillor Butt said, it might be that we don't know the answer to something, so you have to call somebody in to say, can you explain this to us? That's how I see it, and I think that's how you left it last time with what you resolved.
Yeah, that is my understanding as well. I think that and just to be clear on the answer to the question, the public question earlier, is if any member of the public or any councillor has any information or evidence that they do not know is already available to the investigator, then please do send it either directly to the investigator or to myself or to any committee members. And any evidence that is relevant to this scope needs to be looked at. That is not to say that we just want to hear everybody's narrative of what they think happened, because that's not what we're interested in at this stage. But any information or evidence necessary for this investigation, please, should be shared. Councillor Slade.
Thank you, Chair. Given the statement that was made earlier on by 2 former executives of the company who were suggesting that it was important that they were interviewed to get their side of what happened, would it be appropriate to formally write to them and make sure they know that this information is welcome, that they can provide that information? Because if we don't write to them, there's a possibility they might claim that they weren't invited, and actually this is how the invitation is going to be. You provide us the information. If we feel we need more information, we'll come back to you. But I think proactively writing to those individuals would help to negate the need for anything further.
Thank you. Yes, what I'm keen to avoid is giving a platform to certain voices on the narrative of what happened and not balancing that fairly with other voices. So I would be hesitant to invite certain individuals and not cast that net more widely. Having said that, they have submitted a public question, so I think we can make an exception with those 2 individuals and let them know that they are invited to share any information they have which they think the investigator might not have access to, and that they should share that. I think that would be appropriate. Yes, Councillor Butt.
Yes, your last sentence rather summed it up. I think that's relevant. I think it's about if it's relevant with regard to evidence If you say it's narrative and it's opinion and conjecture, that's irrelevant. But if it is actual evidence that can take us forward in this, then people very much welcome to provide Nigel and your good self or whomever with that information. Thank you.
Councillor Beasley.
Thank you, Chair. Coming back to Mr. Stannard's presentation to us tonight and previously, I do have a couple of questions, well, a few questions actually, just really to get clarification so that I know that we all understand the same thing at the same time. I've had quite a lot of back and forth email with Mr. Stannard, as I know other people have, and he facilitated a meeting with myself and others, not fellow Conservatives, around how this was going to be scoped, and he's been, I must say, extremely helpful in that regard, as I knew he would be. Having worked with him for a long time, that was as expected, and I understand the issues that he brought up just now concerning the paragraph 17 issues. I'm glad that that's been clarified, and I assume that those apply to before tonight, right the way through this process, looking forward as well, because I think that's really important for everybody to understand his independence within the confines of the council. It's a hard concept perhaps to fully appreciate, but we don't want to find that there is any undue influence and that everything is channeled directly through him. And I hope out of all of this, that will be everybody's broad understanding that it isn't about sending something to one person or another. Everything has to be channeled directly through Mr. Stannard. He can decide if he wants to delegate it through other people in his part of the council, but that's not for us to decide. So I think that's we need that clarification to be embedded right the way through. So could I just start with the issue in the paper around the timetable, and that brings us back actually to one of the recommendations because it's encapsulated in the second one. I would like to feel comfortable with the proposal, and what concerns me is that an interim report on the 24th of July means it will be written sometime before the 24th of July, which is not very far away at all, and we I think are appreciating how much work's involved in this. And then after that interim report, it could be the 4th of September or the 16th of October, which is actually quite a bit longer than the time we're allowing for the interim report. And the public perception will be that whatever's in the interim report pretty much is what's in the final report. And that's going to put the whole process into some difficulty, I would foresee, particularly as far as the media is concerned, because if the interim report states whatever it states, that will be newsworthy, I suggest. And then anything that happens after that, up to as late as the 16th of October, will not be seen in that same context. And I'm concerned that we're doing all the timetable purely because the 24th of July is the last audit and governance meeting before the chief executive retires. Well, that's not necessarily a good enough reason, frankly, to do that, even if that meant that we had an additional audit and governance meeting sometime after the 24th of July, but before the end of August. At least it wouldn't put the pressure on that I think it will do as we get nearer to the end of July. So that's maybe something to think about, but for me it doesn't work, and I don't think I feel comfortable with that at all. Moving on from there, the issue of those external from the council having input into the investigation, and the question we had at the beginning of this meeting from two of the former executive officers of Future Places. Of course, we want to hear all of that because that will be the counterbalance to much of the work that Mr. Stannard will be looking at. And coupled with that, I think it was Mr. McKinstry, as a member of the public, asked a question about whether anyone involved in Future Places signed a non-disclosure agreement which may prevent those persons coming forward. I didn't, in terms of the response, get a clear yes or no to that. Does that therefore mean that there are people who may not be able to because they have signed an NDA, or does that not apply? I simply don't know. But it would be really outside of our expectations for this investigation if that were to be the case. Nobody should be constrained because of some internal legal mechanism applied by the council, because otherwise it negates what we're trying to do. Maybe that is a piece of work that should be looked at or thought about outside this evening. I simply don't know, but it is really imperative that we do hear from those people. It's the two people who asked the question, or made the statement rather, but there are probably others who were within the company as well. And I think the other part of that, raised in terms of the draft reports and in other contexts as well, that maybe does need to be looked at, isn't just what was that, but were these issues all dealt with in accordance with the Future Places executives, or was there any other influence applied? Because if we don't ask that question, or if that evidence isn't expected to be forthcoming, we won't know the answers to it. I think that's really imperative. It goes to the heart of the governance of all of this. And it looks then at the safeguards that were in that governance and any breaches of that governance, whether applied by officers of Future Places or externally by officers of the council, because we've got two completely different sets of people there. And it's those safeguards or breaches of governance that I think for this committee should be absolutely paramount. We are, after all, the Audit and Governance Committee, and governance is at the heart of everything we do. So those are fairly general questions. Some of them have been answered. Some of them I've had correspondence with Mr. Stannard about, but others may require Mr. Stannard to go away and think about how best we can deal with them in the actuality of the investigation itself.
Thank you. On the first point on the timing, I do think we need to tackle that. I think it's it is a difficult situation as you outline, and not ideal. But I do think we want to get the input of the chief executive before he leaves. I'm open to different ways of doing that. It may be that the interim report is not really an interim report, but rather a report on what we think might be useful to tackle with the chief executive, or something like that. Maybe it's specifically focused on things that would be useful to have the chief executive's input in, something like that. I'd also be open to an extraordinary meeting in August. Councillor Butt.
Yes, thank you. I agree. I think that it would be very useful in our July meeting to have a sort of a state of the review as to where we were. It may not be in the case of a substantive report, but it can tell us where we are at that particular time. There will obviously be much more work to do, but I'd be quite happy to, John, he put it forward, if you propose, be quite happy to second that we had an extraordinary meeting for that specific, so that everybody involved is able to speak up and support themselves and others. I think that's very important. But we certainly wouldn't expect the finished piece in our July meeting, but we would want something sort of, what is the state of the review we're at the minute? What information do you have? What you've have actually done? What is there still to do? Rather than base where we go forward from any interim report being complete in any way, shape or form. Thank you.
Mr. Stannard, do you have any views on whether having an extraordinary meeting in August would actually help you with this challenge?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Beasley. I did fit my schedule around existing meetings, and of course it would help if there was an extraordinary meeting. I think it's an extremely tall order to have all of the answers to all of that scope by July. I would reassure members that I haven't been sat on my hands since the last meeting. Although you haven't agreed a scope, I've got a pretty good idea of the things that you want looking at. So I've commenced, and I've done areas of the scope, particularly trying to understand the finances and the I've reviewed the FOIs that have come in from various people and make sure that they're reconciling to the numbers that I'm seeing. and I've done all that work. So, but having said that, it would be helpful to push the meetings into August. Yeah, of course it would.
So I think I have the power to call an extraordinary meeting. The question is whether or not we push back the July meeting, or if we have an additional meeting specifically on this.
I'd like to see both personally, because I think it's a huge piece of work, and Nigel can bring us what he's got, and we might be able to iterate how to take that forward for the extraordinary meeting, so we can support Nigel in that.
So I am minded then to keep the current schedule of meetings, and then add an additional meeting specifically to this in August. So we can take that away as an action. Other actions to take away is for Democratic Services to write to the people who've submitted public questions, and share with me in advance on what you plan to say on. They're welcome to share information and evidence with the investigator and with me.
Can I
but we
just
can
check? Yeah,
come back on that.
is that are we getting to the point of making? No, we're not. Okay. So as an action, the committee want us to contact Craig Beavers and Gail Mayhew to ask them to submit any additional evidence relating to the scope of the report. Okay.
Yeah. I'm very conscious that Councillor Salmon has been waiting patiently for a long time. I hope you appreciate why we had to speak to members of the committee first. But please, I believe you want to speak. Unless anybody has any objections to that, please, Councillor Salmon.
Right, yeah, thank you. I think I'm only getting one shot speaking, so I'll try not to ramble too much and make all my points in one go. The reason I've attended this committee tonight is to request that this committee recommends that Cabinet draw up costings for an externally led independent investigation of BCP Future Places Limited, using the same scope as whatever you end up finally agreeing on this evening. I want to be absolutely clear as well. It's not a vote of no confidence in our internal audit team. I recognise they all work hard, they uphold professional standards in what's often very difficult circumstances. This is just about recognising the vast amount of public money that has been lost without providing any real value to residents, and ensuring the public can have full confidence in the process of understanding how this happened. Because what we're looking at, we are investigating decisions that involved the most senior officers in this local authority. And internal audit, no matter how capable, is embedded within the structures these officers oversee. In such a situation, I think even the most thorough, independent internal review risks being perceived as the council marking its own homework. And that perception really matters, and we cannot ignore the wishes of the public here. Now, look, we all know in this room that from constitutional principles, from good governance guidance and all of that, that independence does matter. But not only does independence matter, but the appearance of independence. And right now, the appearance of independence is missing. Although I want to stress that that's not the fault of any of those who would be involved in any internal audit of Future Places. And I think what myself and others are asking for tonight is not costly, it's not extravagant. We're not calling for a full external investigation at this stage. We're simply asking that this committee do the responsible thing, request for costings of an external investigation with the same scope as the internal one. And so that just means bringing in external advisor on board to draw up costed options for how much an independent investigation would cost, how long it would take, and so forth. Just for facts. That gives A&G the information it needs to make an informed decision, doesn't delay any of the internal work, doesn't waste any resources, and all it really does is, in fact, enhance our options and protect the integrity of this council. And I think it's really important that members of this committee reflect on the fact that actually some of the most serious questions we now face about Future Places, about unauthorised bonuses, predetermined appointments, potential breaches of a council's financial framework, all of that has come from persistent freedom of information requests, all of them submitted by members of the public who do not trust this council. They will not begin to trust this council if we will not even consider looking at an external investigation that is absolutely, without question, independent of BCP Council. And that alone should give members of this committee pause to think. A scoping exercise is the minimum we owe residents here. All right, that's all I've got to say. I'll pipe down and let you carry on without my contributions.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And to be clear, I think that we do recognise the importance of this and the scale you're talking about, the amount of money for taxpayers, the severity of some of the issues raised. Please don't be under the illusion that we don't think this is not an incredibly serious matter and that we want to treat it lightly. From my perspective, it is because I think it is so important that this is why I think we need to do this work ourselves. And then we can be more specific in making that business case to Cabinet. I would feel more comfortable going to Cabinet and saying, we have looked at this, and here is the specific question we need to get some quotes that need answering. I would feel more confident being able to do that once we've done that work ourselves. So please, I don't think that there is a big gulf between us in what we want to see happening there. But I do think we need to do the work ourselves first. And that was the subject of last meeting's discussion. Councillor Armstrong.
I think we have done quite a lot already, actually, because I remember when I first joined this committee, we had a lessons learned log of future places that was presented to us. Since then, we've had packets of information from other officers. We know that there's a lot of FOI requests that have been made. There's an awful lot of information that's already out there. We've just seen earlier in the public statements, there are people that were involved with the delivery of future places who are willing to provide information. So I would still stand by a move for an independent investigation, because what we're talking about independence does matter, and it is the appearance of independence. And by having fully worked out what would this cost us to actually provide that, because at the previous meeting we didn't even get the opportunity to question that or to delve into it. I think we at least need to know so that we can say to our residents, we're doing this internally because this is how much it would cost us if we're going outside, and the gaps that we're identifying, that we will take that outside so that it can get that full, robust, rigorous investigation.
Thank you, Councillor Wade.
Yes, I think that if the appearance of independence is missing, according to your followers, this is because of you whipping up doubt about the capability of the internal audit. I think that everyone here has agreed that we will refer any gaps in Nigel's work to an external investigation. We're pretty much at consensus with that. So we can, at this point, just move on with the internal investigation and then do any further steps as we need to.
The independent person.
Thank you, Chair. Can we stick to what the paper is asking us to address in terms of recommendations? We're going down the same rabbit holes about external investigations that we went down last time, which takes up considerable amount of time. Time is money. We are not here to waste time or money. If you want to talk about it, perhaps AOB or another time, but not now. We need to get this job done. We need the scope nailed. We are actually delaying this process and prolonging the problem and causing ill ease amongst the public because we are not dealing with the recommendation that is on the paper, on the agenda, yet again.
Thank you. So just to reassure, it's not something that we are in disagreement with in principle of pursuing this. It's a question of the sequencing and the most pragmatic way to approach this. But I am of the opinion that we do need to move on this and let's agree the scope. As part of that, Councillor Armstrong proposing the additional text. I just sent you the additional point from the scope you sent round. So this is to add to the scope: what relationships did Future Places have with other bodies / initiatives, companies and council companies / delivery vehicles? Are we agree that that's what you're proposing to add to the scope that I'm seconding?
I'm just going to send round the full two. There was a 0.4 and a 0.5. Yeah, I've sent that round because I want to ensure that we don't miss any of the points.
Bear with us while we just check that. Do all members have that email that's just come through on adding those additional? I think they should have gone to you, independent members. Let me just check.
You not had it?
It's literally just come through the second. You are on the email. You are on the email list.
He's allowed to do it. I wonder, would it be helpful for the benefit of the public, anyone listening, to actually read out in full what you want to be added to the scope before you take a vote?
Please, Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I'll do that. I think that's a really good idea. So the 0.4, advisory or steering groups to future places. So this, for people listening outside, this is for addition, proposed to add to the scope. What advisory steering groups were there? What was their role? Who was on the group? On what basis were the members chosen? What was the frequency of meetings? How did they take place? What governance arrangements and minutes were in place? What was a Chatham House rules approach applied to any of their discussions? What did this mean in practice? What was the rationale for that decision? Was any payment made to those who took on advisory roles? How was that decided upon and by whom? Which budget did it come from? Did the council know about it? Were there any conflicts of interest? Were these recorded? And then on the second point, 0.5, relationships with other bodies, initiatives and companies. I'm not sure if I can say all those, the actual companies, but basically what relationships did Future Places have with other bodies, initiatives, companies, council companies and delivery vehicles? And to include things like property developers or landowners, planning consultants, events companies, construction. Was there a register of interests and did councillors or officers declare any interests?
So the reason I hesitated to copy all of it was because of the mention of the, and I thought, shall we propose a slightly different approach, which is that we ask that Mr. Stannard incorporate those points into the scope in the way he thinks appropriate for public consumption, so that he takes the purpose behind those questions and puts it into the same language as the rest of the scope. Would you be happy with amending it to that effect?
Yes.
Who is in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, I've got a query because obviously nobody actually has proposed, let alone seconded, the entire recommendation here. We've had a proposal which has been seconded to add something on, which hasn't actually been proposed in the first place. We're going, slightly in the wrong order. So, well, I don't recall anybody actually proposing the recommendation as set out on page 73.
We're just honing that, aren't we? We're honing the recommendation with some addition.
Yeah. Well, we've heard people talk about adding things on, but we hadn't dealt with actually the recommendation as set out. So, for clarity, hopefully that has been proposed and seconded, the recommendation set out on page 73. Obviously, the second bullet point there is talking about the dates, and we've had a discussion about the dates, and obviously, if necessary, we could have an extra meeting in August, but obviously, normally, traditionally with councils, they leave that month empty because officers and councillors and other people go away, school holidays or whatever. There's been a discussion or a mention about going immediately to an external inquiry. we heard at great length at a previous meeting about the costs of that, where it would be extraordinarily high. We were also told that if that happened, Councillor Cox has alluded to the fact that, you know, there isn't some money down the back of the sofa to pay for it, that other services would actually have to be cut. And, you know, Councillor Salmon and Councillor Armstrong have been talking about spending this money. I would really like to know what services they're thinking of cutting to pay for it, because it would be extraordinarily expensive. Other councils have done it and millions of pounds have been spent. And in initial discussion with Mr. Stannard about this, he has assured me and the chair that if he particularly does discover things from his inquiry that makes him very concerned, warranting an external inquiry, he will bring it to our attention. Hence, you know, the interim report on the 24th of July. But I'll just get back to my original point. You know, is it clear that we actually have proposed and had seconded the recommendation with that amendment? Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I would like some advice from Democratic Services on whether we need to amend the recommendation to expect an interim report on 24th July 2025, and replace that with expect an interim report at an extraordinary meeting to be convened in August. And that's so the first bullet point of the recommendation will be the scope of the internal audit investigation as shown in Appendix 1 or as amended following discussion. So I think we can all support that one. And then the second item on the second bullet point of the recommendation is to expect an interim report at an extraordinary meeting to be convened in August 2025, and a final report on 4th of September or 16th of October 25. So it's just replacing with the extraordinary meeting for the July meeting. And then the third bullet point of the recommendation, I think, remains unchanged. Is everyone in agreement with that being put? And would anybody like to propose that? Councillor Beasley.
Chair, I think that's very well put together, and I'm glad we've had the discussion before getting to the recommendations. I do need to say that that is the right way to do it. These aren't people making moves. This is so that we can hone the recommendations to the committee's objectives and outcomes. So that has been done correctly. All I wanted to say was it should be possible for us to do something in that last week of August. I note from my diary on the 26th of August, there's no review and scrutiny board. So the council is active that week. And if Democratic Services were able to find something, that would still comply with the end of August, but it would be in the week when most people are expecting the council to be back in active business. So sometime in that week, it starts with a bank holiday, ONS board's on the Tuesday, which leaves us the rest of the week to try and find something, all of which is within August, which I think is plenty of notice. So I certainly would be supporting of that.
Thank you. I think that's a sensible point. And obviously has to be subject to the outgoing Chief Executive's diary as well.
So it was moved by Councillor Butt.
I believe this recommendation has been moved by Councillor Butt. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Would anybody like to second it? Councillor Wake, thank you very much. Shall we have a vote?
Okay.
All
So those in favour.
So we are voting. It is recommended that A&G Committee agree the scope of the internal audit investigation as shown in Appendix 1 as amended following discussion. So that includes the amendment that you put forward. Agreed to expect an interim report at an extraordinary meeting in August 2025 and a final report on 4th of September 2025 or 16th of October 2025. And any recommendations arising from the investigation will be assigned to a lead officer and have a target date for implementation. A&G will monitor implementation in line with high priority recommendations. All those in... Oh, Councillor Phipps.
One question. So this won't be on the agenda at all in July then?
So it'll be an interim.
Because I thought we said we were perhaps there was something.
Yeah, the whole idea was to have what we had in July, and then that extraordinary meeting to then decide upon. That's what we're hoping for.
I understood that we would have a focused meeting in August specifically on this, to allow that bit more time for Mr. Stannard to pull it together.
With the deepest of respect, Madam Chairman, I think that's an awfully long time to wait. And I think if there were information available that Nigel was able to share with us at that August meeting, I think we should have an agenda item to take that. And then you can obviously dispose as you so wish. I think that might be the best way forward.
Mr. Stannard, would you find it acceptable to have an item on the agenda for an update as it stands, with the understanding that there's going to be a fuller discussion in August?
Yes.
So can we amend the recommendation? So the second bullet point will now say to expect an interim report on 24th of July 2025 and at an extraordinary meeting in August 2025. Mr. Richards.
Chair, can I just come in on behalf of Nigel, in the sense that Nigel is one individual. Nigel is due annual leave, and I would encourage him to take annual leave. So therefore doing a report in July and then doing a report in August and have an annual leave, probably, hopefully, in between, might be difficult. So the committee may need to be tolerant with regards to when reports are available before committee dates, because actually there is a huge amount that's relying on Nigel and the team to produce. For 2 reports to 2 committees, in a very difficult time, when normally, the reason why we don't have meetings in August is generally because of annual leave arrangements. So I'd just beg people to bear that in mind, please.
Thank you. I think that's a very reasonable point to make, and I think that tolerance on our part, I think we should all agree on that level of tolerance. Councillor Waite, I think you went first.
Just very quickly, would we find it acceptable if the July was a verbal update with the fuller meeting to follow in August?
I think it can be whatever, with respect, I think it needs to be whatever Nigel can do at that stage.
Exactly.
So if you call it interim, if it ends up verbal with a sheet, perhaps at the meeting, whatever Nigel can work around that. But I think it's really key we do have that.
Yeah.
And then the further one later in August. Yeah, for public assurity, if nothing more. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beasley.
Yes, I think it's important that we manage expectations here. If all we're going to have is a verbal update in July without a sort of cross-examination of Nigel Stannard in the meantime as well, that is fine. But we must manage our own expectations. We're not going to get very much, I suspect, other than Mr. Stannard telling us that the investigation is coming on well, and he anticipates being on time for the end of August for the interim report. If we expect any more than that, we're setting ourselves up to fail, and it rather negates the purpose of having the 2 meetings rather than the one. So I'm assuming that the bulk of the July meeting is whatever is on the agenda for July, with this minor addition, and then the special meeting at the end of August is purely around the interim report. I'd just like to get that clarified so that we can refer back to it later.
Yeah, I think those are all well-made points. We know that you do need. Oh, sorry, Councillor Phipps.
I thought one of the things that was mentioned was that we would be able to, in July, potentially, Chief Executive would still be here. He wouldn't have left by then. So at the end of the day, if we're just getting a verbal report, I'm not saying we have the whole report, but maybe some bullet points or something. I think we need something. And if there's something we do need to perhaps ask or whatever, otherwise we get to August and we won't have anybody to ask anything, will we? But it was mentioned, that was mentioned, and we seem to be, I'm probably not watering down, but July is getting now to be not a lot by the sound of it.
No, I think that is also a reasonable point. But I do think that Mr. Stannard needs to be assured of our tolerance. Wherever you get to in July, we are appreciative of that. Whatever form of update you're able to give, we'd be grateful for that. In an ideal situation, I think that meeting you would give us an indication of the areas where you think we should prioritise to raise with the Chief Executive. I think even just starting to flesh out those bits where the Chief Executive's input might be most valuable would be useful, and that can help formulate what we prioritise in the August meeting. But again, it is whatever you're able to do by that point. Does that sound reasonable?
That sounds doable. Can I just check whether, because what I perceive may exist is that, for example, I might be very well progressed section 4, so old section, current so detailed expenditure incurred by i.e. a schedule. I think I can pretty much give you that in July, you know, showing where what was spent, when, on what. Now, so do you want it piecemeal or do you want it all together? So I guess what I'm saying is you might have nothing in section 1, you might have half of section 2 and all of section 4. Is that okay? Yep.
Yeah. I think we're content with piecemeal. We recognise the scale of this task, and we recognise that it's probably more than one meeting's worth of discussion. So whatever you're able to provide, we will then ask questions on that as appropriate, and then roll over into the August meeting as needed. All right. So all in favour of the recommendation as spelled out before?
Can I make a comment, Chair? I can hear everyone rolling their eyes. Sorry. That I can vote. I'm sorry.
Right, just checking. Are you voting in favour? So we were all just putting our hands up for in favour.
I understand. I want to vote in favour, but I also want to make a request for the scope to be costed out in terms of for an independent investigation. So I hear all the moans in the room, but I would like that noted on the agenda, on the minutes of the meeting, that I've requested that. So just for clarity, I'm not saying, I'm talking about a costing analysis of what an independent external investigation would look like. So I'd appreciate being heard. Thank you.
So I think we'll have that noted, and we can make that reflect that in the minutes. It's not an action. That it's not an action, but it's that you're noted that you want that to go forward. But I do think we are all aware of the need to do this and have this in mind. I mean, I think the costings will depend on the specific questions which will fall out of the work we do, in my view. But I think having the costings of that is important. I think we can all acknowledge that.
It is important to just to pick up on what services do we cut. I mean, what a ridiculous thing to say. We have a precedent for funding external investigations. It's part of what we would normally do where there's an investigation, say, for in standards. So I take that back.
Thank you. Okay, so let's do the vote. All in favour of the recommendation as set out, please raise your hands.
So that's unanimous, Chair.
Excellent, thank you very much. We look forward to hearing on your work or reading on your work in July. And thank you very much for the work you've done in pulling together that scope so far. Okay, moving on to item 10. We agreed previously, this is on Carter's Quay report update. We agreed previously, now the background to this is that, is there an issue there? Sorry, I couldn't hear. I think we're okay. All right, so I'm terribly sorry. I haven't been able to see you. You're exactly out of my line of vision behind Councillor Cox. I'm very sorry for that. Councillor Canavan, would you like to come up to the table? I appreciate that, and I am sorry again. I can only pass on my apologies. I did not see your hand raised. You're obscured from my line of vision, and I am sorry for that. You're welcome to speak now if that would be welcome. Otherwise, I can only invite you to speak at the July meeting. Okay, moving on to item 10, Carter's Quay report update. We agreed that we would be provided updates on the progress with Carter's Quay. We agreed that because the situation is ongoing with the administrator, it would be inappropriate to start an internal audit piece of work at this moment in time, but that didn't mean we wanted it to fall through the gaps of oversight. So we've asked that there be regular updates. Now, this is the update provided by the Director of Investment and Development. Following the meeting in March, the Council has reiterated its formal offer to the administrator and instructed legal advisers to prepare a robust response given the lack of progress since last year. Cabinet and Council will be presented with an option report in October to agree a way forward. The committee is reminded that the Council has a charge over the land, which means the administrator cannot sell the land without the Council's agreement to release. So on that, I invite any comments from any members of the committee. I remind us that we have an item on the agenda later on this year to look specifically at the Council's approach to regeneration projects with a focus on looking at Carter's Quay. I am minded to ask I'm minded to ask Mr. Stannard if he would like to comment on the scrutiny of this as it's ongoing. I'm conscious that Councillor Bartlett raised this previously with us about making sure that we don't just wait for situations to unfold before we as a committee get involved, but equally we don't want to step outside of our scope. So in terms of the appropriate scrutiny of this as it's an ongoing issue, is that something you'd be able to comment on?
Yes, I've had a chat with the director that you mentioned who provided the update, and what she's willing to do, if it would help the committee, is to produce on that timetable or the meeting that you mentioned, Chair, a recap, if you like, a timeline, key events through the process, because she's conscious that some of you as councillors weren't here then because it occurred or started in 2021, yeah, so that's the offer from, you know, and would that update or recap help?
What are members' thoughts on that? My instinct is that sounds like that would be very useful until we do a review later in the year. What do other members think of that? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you. There was a very useful report prepared, actually with great hurry and rush, for the 9th of October overview and scrutiny meeting, which I've got up on my screen here, which very succinctly, as at then, said what had happened. So the timeline of events up until October, a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago, is summarised. And yes, it would be interesting to use that as the start of the report. You know, I said at a couple of previous meetings, it's an ongoing negotiation with the administrators, and until literally the dust has settled on the outcome of that, we can't really investigate. But I agree, you know, Mr. Stannard, though he's got one other thing to do, not many things to do over the next few weeks, can liaise with the appropriate director to make sure that he's kept informed of what's going on. Yeah, I agree that it would be useful to have another quick verbal report back at our next meeting. But if there's some material development, then obviously I'd like the director to be present at the meeting and give us an in-person report. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. I'm still a bit confused as to why can't we put a scope together? We're not investigating right now because we've got other legal issues going on with this. But what's the rationale for not having a scope so that when those legal conversations and processes are complete, at least, you know, we can get on with what we need to get on with, and we're not going to take months and months putting something together. I'm just concerned that things will get a bit lost.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, what I think might be helpful is if we start off with something from the officers involved to give this update on how we've got to the situation we're in, and I think that may then very well form the basis of identifying the questions that we're going to want asked when we come to look at this. So my view is that that will start the ball on exactly as you say. I'm conscious Councillor Bartlett has his hand up online, and I know he raised this previously. Councillor Bartlett, would you like to come in there?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. The point I'd like to say, first of all, the update is, it really tells us nothing. It takes us no further forward than the last meeting. But the point I'd like to make is the outcome of this issue will not affect how the issue originated. And the whole point of the investigation was to look at how we got into this situation, not how we were getting out of it at the end. That now is in a due legal process, and that will happen. There's no way that the council is going to be able to influence that. What we need to understand is how we got into this situation. And when we talk about the financial implications of the last situation, those pale into insignificance compared with the situation, financial disadvantage this council will get through potentially through this issue. And that's why it's so important not to kick the can down the road even longer. We should be addressing how we got into this situation at all, and it needs to be done now and not waiting for this situation to evolve, which could take months or even years to resolve itself. So I would implore the committee to take some positive action now and start an investigation as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Mr. Sannard, when did you say that the director would be in a position to share this written brief on how we've got to where we are?
We didn't discuss timelines, I must admit, but I assume, following Councillor Andrews' comments, that there's a good chunk of the update that is already there, and therefore it's building on that. So I'd need to check, but I don't see a reason why it can't come to the next Audit and Governance Committee, which is July.
So that is, we've now freed up some time in the July meeting, potentially. So can I suggest that we ask the director to provide a report to the July meeting on the office's current working summary of why we've got into this situation we have, and we can learn from that, those of us who are new to the topic, and that can then inform the decision as to the scoping of a specific inquiry subsequent to that. Now, I know we have this item on the agenda later in the year, so my thinking would be that might be the opportunity to confirm further work on it. But keen on others' views. Councillor Phipps.
Can I just clarify then what you're saying, that we get an update report at the next meeting, which is July, and then you're saying we won't do any scoping on it till the next meeting, which is then going to be September, is it? So we are kicking it down the road a bit, aren't we? Because we said, I remember the last time we looked at this, we wanted to do something quite soon, or then it was said it was quite urgent, and we were told by the monitoring officer, oh, we can't do this, you can't do that, because it's all legal stuff going on. And I remember, I think I was one of the ones that said, well, so what? We don't have to get involved in that, but it doesn't mean that we can't take it forward, because things just keep going on and on and on, and we end up getting nowhere. It'll be Christmas and you won't have done this. So I really think we need to, at the next meeting, be doing something. I think you're absolutely right. Not just saying, oh, we'll have a report, we'll think about it, we'll sit on our hands, oh, maybe we might do it the next time. Let's get on with it.
Do I take it that you're supportive of the idea of asking the officers to present a report to us in July for us to challenge? So the Councillor Beasley, sorry, you've been waiting. Please go. I'll come back.
So can I try and help to pull this together? Because Councillor Bartlett is absolutely right. Councillor Phipps is absolutely right, but we've got to find a way of getting from here to where we want to be. And what in order to look at scoping, we need to understand the broader picture, and that broader picture can only be brought to us in some sort of report from the director, and our next meeting is in July. So those are, if you like, the milestones. What I think the committee would appreciate is the statement that you read out a moment ago. Could that please be circulated? But could it have added something that gives us the degree of comfort that I think we're all looking for, which is what the monitoring officer said to us previously, which Councillor Phipps referred to, about what we couldn't do and what we could do and all the rest of it, which sounded at the time not really very substantial, and it sounds less so today, to be frank. What we also need to know within that picture from the director is we've engaged specialist lawyers to interface with the administrators, which was the right thing to do, and I think Councillor Cox and I have had a conversation about that. Absolutely the right thing to do, because we're not specialists as a council in that, and I doubt our legal team are either. But we need to have some kind of update around that. So we need to know that actually they're not just on the case, but they are achieving X, Y, and Z. And we need to centre all of this on the governance. It's really, really material to it. So when we get that report in July, it needs to be referencing back to the governance at every stage if we're looking at something historic before we get to the scoping. That's the right way to be doing it, and it's what our remit actually is. So if we could encapsulate all of that, I think we will manage to, as best we can at this stage, I emphasise that, as best we can at this stage, we will be able to bring the committee to the same position and the best position we can get to at the moment with what we know.
Thank you. That's very helpful. From my understanding was that the initial discussion was about whether or not to have a full investigation, not unlike the Bayside pop-up review, which would be very, very thorough, and there would be limitations on what could be done on that because of what was ongoing. It's not to say we couldn't do anything, but it wouldn't be as full because if it was happening now, and whereas a future investigation by internal audit could be that much more thorough. So that was my understanding. It might not be correct, but either way, I think that it stands that we want to hear from the officers at the July meeting. How have we got to where we are? Give us the opportunity to ask the questions that need to be asked about how we've got here. And I think we can have the discussion at that meeting about where we want to go from there. The question about whether or not, at what point to get internal audit to do further work, scoping, further investigation, the timing of that. I think let's have that discussion, but when we've been presented with the information from officers. Please.
Just to add to that, I mean, I think that's perfectly feasible. I think the problem is we all think that the long-term solutions are going to be solved next week, the week after. Actually, I think if you change the assumption and assume that's going to take ages, then we can do what we can do now, which is look at the process, the governance, how do we get to where we got to the point where we're requiring a site and it's gone into administration, and then leave the secondary bit about, I mean, you can rest assured that we will carry on monitoring that, doing that proactively. We can repeat that and tell you where we are at the moment on that as far as we can. But I think the focus of the audit committee's original request was how did we get to here? And I don't see any sort of impediment to producing that really, other than offer the time and focus. So I think if you ask for that for July, that sounds perfectly reasonable to me. Yeah.
Okay, so does that need to be a proposal?
As long as everybody's happy with what's being suggested. Yeah.
Mr. Sannad.
Can I just make a point, because it's opportune and it's a matter of principle, is that internal audit do not need to do an investigation all the time. I think it's perfectly reasonable for Audit and Governance Committee to say to management what went on, give us a report what went on. Now, you might get that report and then there are gaps and you might say, oh, we need this verified, and then it could be internal audit, it could be something else, it could be. So I think we just, we sometimes have a tendency that internal audit is the only vehicle to do a investigation or tell us what happened.
Mr. Councillor Beasley.
Chair, what I set out a moment ago is a report which can be done between the director and our legal department. It doesn't require internal audit. It does require accountability from both those parts of the council, and it needs to be something we can interrogate as a committee. So what we don't want is something that's bland and doesn't actually get to the heart of what we've been asking for. It could easily be done, and I'm sure within that timescale, as the Chief Executive has referenced, that is perfectly achievable as well. So I don't think we need to trouble Mr. Stannard with additional work to fill his lack of any time at all. What we need is to make sure that those two parts of the council are listening to what we're saying tonight. They may need to actually physically do that, and that they then act on it.
Thank you. I hope that that addresses some of the concerns that were raised previously. We don't need to have an full internal audit investigation at this stage, but let's ask the questions that we obviously want to be asking at the July meeting. And I hope you can pass on to the director that a sense of what we're going to be asking and expecting from that. Thank you. Okay, so shall we move on? I don't think that doesn't need a vote, does it? Shall we move on to item 11? That's internal audit, audit plan 2025-26, responses to queries. Now this is in response to the independent person, Lindy, who asked a number of detailed questions at the last meeting on the approach to the audit plans as provided to us as a committee. And thanks to Mrs. Sana for putting on a briefing session for us earlier in the week to talk through the answers to those questions. And if I may, my summary is that we have a duty as a committee to get comfortable with the coverage of risks, and that internal audit are seeing the full scope of risk, the universe of risks at the council, and they're taking a risk-based approach to doing that, and it's thorough, and that they are getting adequate coverage over time. That doesn't mean we need to see the incredibly detailed audit plan, and it's a judgment question for us as to how much detail we want presented to us each committee. So I found that briefing session very helpful, and the report has addressed, I think, some of the concerns about where it might be not too difficult to add a little bit more colour to the packs. So I'm conscious of the late time, but would you like to present? But I don't want to force you to present for too long.
No, thank you. My colleague Ruth Hodges is going to lead on these two items.
Thank you. Would you like to speak on it?
Thank you, Chair, and I will make it brief. I think you gave a good overview there of what we were going to cover. So this is the first of two reports this evening, which is in response to the queries raised by the independent person at the last meeting. So the report seeks to provide assurance to Audit and Governance Committee that the Chief Internal Auditor is satisfied that we comply with relevant mandatory audit standards in the production of our internal audit plan. And in relation to the information provided to Audit and Governance Committee, this is something that's evolved over the years in terms of trying to strike the right balance between the level of detail that we give members in terms of their approval of the plan and their understanding of what we do, and trying to balance that with not providing excessive or overly detailed information whilst making sure we still comply with all the relevant standards. So this is something that has evolved and it can continue to evolve. And Chair, you mentioned we've had a helpful briefing session about that, which certainly I found useful, and I'm glad to hear that members found that useful as well. To that end, we've included in the pack the next item in terms of the audit plan, a more detailed look at what we were going to do in Q1, and that included information such as our own internal audit risk assessment, the date it was last audited, the sorts of things it might cover as part of that audit, linked to corporate risks and other risks, and linked to the strategic plan. Following that helpful briefing session on Tuesday, Nigel circulated today that extrapolated to the whole year. It's a little bit rough and ready because it was produced since Tuesday, but that extrapolates on the operational plan that I referenced in the earlier in the paper to cover, shows what we intend to do throughout the whole year. As we've discussed, that will change through the year as risks come up and become more important, or as resources used elsewhere. For example, future places audit, depending how long that takes, may then have ramifications on our audit resource. So that's it from me, but just to say that that discussion is really helpful and really welcome in terms of how and what information that you would find useful. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I suggested at the briefing, but can I make a formal suggestion that we have, we add an item to one of the non-core meetings later in the year, a briefing session on how internal audit gets comfortable with its coverage and how it assesses the order of audits undertaken. And you can show us the tool that you use to do that. I think it would be useful for us to get a better understanding of how that coverage, so we're not just taking their word for it that they've got the that they've got appropriate coverage. This is Anna.
I'd just like to reiterate as well that we propose to use the Microsoft Teams channel that we've got as Audit and Governance Committee to post some extra information in there. So, if some members of the committee want to see more detail, they can see it. And if others are comfortable with the summary levels in our reports, then that's also fine. So, but I won't just post that willy-nilly. I'll make sure that you're all tagged so you know that something new's been posted and you can choose whether to look at it or not.
Thank you. Would members be supportive of adding that to the future plan on a non-core meeting?
Sorry, Chair, is that one and the same as the proposal that Councillor Andrews made previously for a deep dive into internal audit? Is it one and the same thing, or are you proposing a second session?
I think this would be a separate session, but I need to check. I think I do mean this genuinely to be a targeted session focused on internal audit. How do you get comfortable with the coverage and making sure that it's a risk-based approach? So specifically targeted at that. Councillor Andrews, are you able to add any colour to that?
Well, I would only add that the more training we can get as councillors, independent members, the better, because obviously, with one or two exceptions, we're not auditors or accountants. We're people elected to represent the community of BCP, and we need a bit of training, but not hours and hours of training. Thank you.
Let me introduce the independent member. Lindy, thank you again for your detailed questions and drawing the points to our notice. Did you want to come in on this?
Thank you, Chair. So with the document that was circulated this afternoon, I can say that it now addresses, with looking at the whole year, it does address about half of the points that I've raised, and I'm thankful for that. Just quickly to note, I quickly checked your strategic risks and the high ones as per the report of 20 March 2025 in the strategic risk register that was presented. And there's, now that you've given us the full audit universe in this document of this afternoon, there's risks 27 environmental impacts that scored high that you did not cover in the plan. I just wanted to make that quick note. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm pleased to see that some of the points have already been addressed, and we may, and we can discuss this further when we do the briefing session on this particularly. Ms. Sanders, did you want to come in on that particular risk, or we could take that away?
Can we take that away if that's okay, and we'll provide a written update to the committee? I think it's too detailed. We need to analyse a bit better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wade.
Just want to thank Nigel for your excellent work, sort of pulling things together between Tuesday and today. It was really helpful to have that briefing on Tuesday, and just because it wasn't in public, I just want to mention a little bit about the discussion had, that it was quite useful for us to understand the different ways that different members of the committee look at things, because like Marcus says, we're not audit professionals. There's no expectation for me to be an audit professional. So, I appreciate the information being given to me to be accessible, and I, definitely would like that to continue. But I'm thankful for the input that Lindy's had as well. And I would like to propose that we approve the internal audit plan, please.
Excellent. So this is recommended that Audit and Governance Committee notes the responses to the audit plan inquiries raised at the Audit and Governance Committee on 20th of March 2025, Do we have consensus to note that? Great. Item 12, internal audit plan 2025-26. Ruth, thank you.
Thank you. And this follows neatly on from the last report. So it's an update of the one that we brought in March, providing that extra detail in the quarterly plan, in this case, of what we wanted to audit for this year. So I don't think there's too much more I can add to that, but I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Did any members want to come in with any questions on that? From my part, I thought that I was content with it. I think the coverage looks appropriate, and especially supported by the discussion we had earlier this week. Was that a hand? Councillor Phipps.
I was just going to say I'd be happy to propose that we accept it.
Yeah. All in favour of approving the recommendation, so let me read it out in full. It is recommended that the committee approves the internal audit plan 2025-26, including the detailed breakdown of Q1 audits, notes the 2025-26 budget for the internal audit service, which was approved by council as part of the 2025-26 council budget setting and medium-term financial plan update in February 2025. All in favour, please raise your hand.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. That is unanimous. So just before we finish, I wanted to make a note that the independent persons raised a concern that we talk about the audit plan and audit reports undertaken at the end of the agenda. And at the end, this time of night, we are flagging, and it is so important to what we do that their request is, can we bring it forward in the agenda where possible? Now, this has to be balanced with the needs to let officers get away if they have to give a short update. So rather than have a formal change, I would say that I hope to make sure that we make that adjustment where possible, where practical in the agendas, but we'll see how it goes on that. Well, yes, a little bit later today than usual, but thank you all for your patience in that. Thank you. Thank you to everyone watching. Good evening.